Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei unlocked divine dividing at young age and got huge harem? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Kerlongsj Evert Orlejov for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. In the holiness of the Vatican, one wouldn't expect someone to pursue earthly desires. And yet, it was found, in nearly all sorts of places. In one place, it was a garage where one young man sat by his bike. Issei sat by, tinkering on his bike. He was happy while the heat of Italy was hitting in full force. They had a cold winter and now, a blazing hot summer. It was enough to drive most people inside and not even go out unless they were forced to, work, or had a holy appointment. So in both cases, Issei was safe. He sighed while he sat back while looking over at the R6. He found that it was worth it, and it also reminded him of home. Penny for your thoughts, partner? A booming voice echoed in his head. Of course, only he heard it. Just the usual things, Albion. What else is there? Issei shot back while he could hear a being that was far superior to himself, but also bound to him, scoff. You have something on your mind. Looking back from the place, Issei watched over the place. A garage somewhere quiet and off his mind was how he liked to work. Why should he be worried was about something else? Oh, right, his work, yep. And with that, it remained quiet. His sacred gear had learned one thing throughout the years. There was no use in trying to dragging the words out of him. Issei was just sitting back while he was nearly done on the checkup. Working as a part-time exorcist had its advantages. A fat paycheck was one of them. It also came with its drawbacks. One of those was to deal with holier-than-thou pricks, and they called him a hypocrite. Just because he didn't mind having notches on his belt didn't make him worse than him. In fact, he was honest about it. Issei decided that he had done enough on his bike. Closing the garage, he went to sit outside. Whether you were in the capital of the Catholic Church or in the middle of a small Italian village, there was a jack of shit to do on a Sunday afternoon. Either way, he was done with it. He had given the Pope, just went straight to the holiness himself, to let Michael know that Issei Hayadu, the hackeryuku, was no longer employed. Reason for resignation? Besides all bullshit, Asia Argento's excommunication by the church. Yeah, the big guy might have done that to save the church, but that didn't stop the fact that Issei was mighty pissed when he found out that his favorite partner/healer was gone off the deep end and left to her own devices. He met Asia when they were children. Brought here after he went along with Irina. There was one good reason. A white gauntlet on his arm showed what he was. Of course, the church was interested in getting the White Dragon Emperor under their devices. Problem was that the more Issei learned off his sacred gear, the more he was repulsed by the church, especially with the corruption setting in, with the last few years. The Pope did what he could, but he was one man and one man couldn't do much. You are sure about this, partner? Because once this goes, there is no going back. I'm gonna save Asia and go over back home. There is nothing for me here. Irina. Zenobia. Gabriel. Michael. The big guy. I would say there is more here. Issei shrugged as he walked around. The Vatican might have small streets and narrow passages. He loved that part of the architecture. Using his normal strength, Issei climbed to the roof of his house. In the heat of 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, he sat outside while looking at the sun. There was a part of him that loved being outdoors like this. The part of dragon stopped him from going overboard, and he would be happy sitting outside in the blazing heat while the day went by. I want to save Asia. Sides, you knew I was going to retire. Might do you some good going back. I know that devils are in Kuoh, so it might get you a mate. Issei scoffed at that idea. He had slept with more women in his life than he cared to remember. A pretty face, but down there, not much difference. You know why I don't do that. Besides, why would I even settle? Not even for Asia. You know she likes you. Issei had to admit that. Asia liked him, and that feeling was mutual. And even though he had women left and right, he never made moves on the ones who were closest to him. Just because he never made chasey vows like Zenobia, Irina and Asia, didn't mean that he didn't respect those. He rubbed off on them when they worked together. While Asia was a sheltered maiden, working half a decade with Issei caused her to turn and play. She would never betray those vows she made, but she could tease him. He often welcomed that. Being that closed up wasn't good for a young lady. At least, this way, she could survive for a while, before he would save her. But then what? From what he heard, the ones running Kuoh were the two sisters of the Mao. Rias Gremory and Sona Shurtorai. While the latter wasn't piquing his interest too much, he had seen pictures of Rias. Besides the red hair, there were many things that he admired about her. He wouldn't change his ways too much around the place. Issei. He heard his name being called, and when looked down, he saw two young ladies standing. Of course, he couldn't just leave without saying goodbye to them. Neither of the two was surprised when Issei jumped down from the top floor and landed right in front of them. Irina Shidu and Zinovia Korda had seen quite a bit of their dragon. Irina was one of his friends when they lived in Kuoh. They often stayed over and played together, but it was only later that he found out that Irina was a she instead of a he. Irina had grown up nicely in the last few years. Her long hair in a chestnut color was tied into twin tails. Her purple eyes shined at him with pricking tears. He had seen her body in the skin-tight church battle attire just like Zinovia, but now, both of them were wearing long robes. Zinovia had blue hair with a green streak. It was short, and that was how she liked it. Her eyes were yellow, and Issei found it was fitting they would say goodbye dressed modestly. He wondered why they had chosen to wear those clothes like this, as it was hot for them. Underneath those robes, they had to be sweating, and he preferred biker clothes above those outfits. Issei, you really are leaving? Zinovia asked while Irina remained quiet. She knew when her friend made up his mind, there would be no stopping him. Yes, and don't try to stop me, he answered, and both girls knew that he wouldn't stop with his decision. They knew why, and unlike them, he was free to make his calls. Please. We need you. Irina had tried the tears before, but Issei shook his head. Wiping the tears away from her eyes, he offered her some kindness. Come on. My childhood friends shouldn't cry over an idiot like myself. She had to laugh through the tears. Opening his garage, he rolled his bike out. The airport would be open and he had a flight to catch. Issei, please. Zinovia begged him, and Issei felt his heart twinge a bit. I have made my call. There is nothing else. Looking over them, he felt sorry, but they had to be comforted by others. But he wouldn't leave them just crying her. So grabbing the two girls by the shoulders, they felt a searing kiss on there. Irina was the first to go down, while Zinovia fell down on the pavement as she felt the kiss. Turning the helmet on, Issei winked at them. We'll see each other again. I am sure of that. And with that, Issei drove off with his bike. He was going back home, while he left another one. Scene change. Issei knew that getting his bike on board wouldn't be easy, but luckily, his cars had already been flown over to Japan. He had booked a luxurious apartment in Kuoh that had enough place to store them. He would be turning heads as soon he strolled into Kuoh. Now, he was taking a plane in an airplane. First class with enough space. While there were limits to what he spent money on, this was a one-way flight to Tokyo. From there out, he could drive to Kuoh. He sat back with a drink and sank into his headphones. Music began blaring into them. He could sleep as well during those times. He had no idea what he would be getting into, but he doubted that it wouldn't be anything that he couldn't handle, as long the captain would keep the bogus to himself. From someone who should be flying an airplane, he was taking a mighty big interest in what he was doing back in his place. After 14 hours, Issei had to thank Albion for knocking him out during the flight. That way he felt the trip go by fast, and he no longer had to worry about his energy levels. He slept like a log while the Sunday had set over into Tuesday now. It would be a week before he would be in Kuoh taking classes. It would be more to enjoy his daily high school life. He would need to keep it in moderation though. Kuoh was unfamiliar territory to him now. As soon he got from the airplane, he smelt it. The smell of soy sauce, mixed with chemicals and the likes. Well, he would be getting his out of Tokyo. In the parking lot, his Yamaha waited. When the whole thing was set done, he drove off. He had to take a mighty long tour, but for Issei, there was nothing better. He was going back home for a good reason. To get Asia. He only wondered where the blonde would be. At least, he had a good idea of what he could do during that time. Asia had to get to Kuoh, and from there, he could go further. And well, those other ladies didn't look too bad either. Unlike other beings, Issei didn't discriminate against other beings. Well, it wouldn't hurt taking a tour around. And from there on, Issei drove his bike. All to the south. Kuoh lay there. If estimates worked out, and he drove with just a break in between, he would get into Kuoh in 3 days. That would give him enough time to settle in. And with that done, Issei drove off to his new home. He lived for the battle and would see that he had new scraps to get into. It would be good training until he found his foes. Destiny's Ed. 3 days later, on Thursday, late evening, Issei Hayato rolled into Kuoh. Miles before he would even get there, he made sure that he sealed his powers deep. It would be nearly impossible to detect him. Nearly. Issei had learned through life that the impossible didn't exist. It had been ages since he set foot into Kuoh. The city had changed a lot. Roads were gone or they appeared. Playgrounds were torn down or rebuilt. God, he missed this place. When he drove into the city, it really hit home how much he missed his home. He passed by his folks' place. Half of him wanted to jump off and ring the bell. A part of him was prepared to get a hit on the face from his father, his mother crying, and a whole lot more. As soon he walked in, the spell done on them by the church would be dispelled, a real cruel fate for his folks. He learned only later that they had lost 2 siblings before, and that they had given the information that Issei died during a traffic accident. Cruel, but having a young dragon in your house would lead to deaths that were tenfold in cruelty. He couldn't do that to them. Not until he was sure he could keep them safe. Issei hoped that his parents could ever forgive him for that. And explain why every month, nearly 10,000 USD, converted into yen, was planted on their account. Then he drove to his place. A 2-stories flat with a luxurious living room and all modern accessories plus a garage. Opening the door, not with a magical seal, but with a key, he saw his Ford Thunderbird was delivered there. He had chosen a white color that matched him. Good to see you again, he softly said as he parked his Yamaha next to it. It was Friday in a few hours and he could do some food shopping. The place wasn't suited to racing, but he could use his bike to get around. Closing the garage, he walked upstairs to see the place. He found the style was built after the style in Europe. He had spent a lot of nights in Germany, Scandinavia, and the Alps that he enjoyed the style of a cozy house. The place had a living room that was converted into a kitchen. Nearly all utensils were inside and the place was cooking electricity. That worked for him. On missions he had learned to cook, especially because Issei would never allow Zenobia near a stove again when he had the opening. That was just asking for a lot of trouble. After that, Issei walked upstairs. The bathroom proved to have a walk-in shower plus a sink to brush his teeth, and after 3 days on the road, his shiny bones needed to get cleaned, and after that, he went upstairs and laid on the roof. He watched the stars. The song 1,000 Miles played in his head, and I need you, and I miss you, and now I wonder, can I fall into the sky? He was too tired to even think about that seriously but closed his eyes. When that was going on, he was sleeping on the rooftop. For the while, he was at peace. Monday next week. The weekend went by too fast. He drove around the city after he was done with shopping. There was some food that he liked and went out to eat at restaurants. He doubted that many of his elementary school friends would recognize him. He had grown a lot of muscles and stood nearly a head taller than most. In the morning, he would train after breakfast until noon. Then he would get to the school to get his transfer in order. His past was ironclad. He lived in Kuoh until he had to live with an uncle in Hokkaido. He stayed there until his uncle passed. The handy thing was that after 1 decade of this work, and with Issei's mindset, he made friends easily. It wasn't too hard to pull those off and get around on that. As soon he walked into the school, he could feel the stars of the girls on him while the boys were glaring at him. He ignored them as he found no reason to interfere. He knew what it could bring on high school girls. In his bed, he preferred more mature girls. Speaking of maturity, excuse me? He was stopped by 2 devils. He might hide his scent, but they didn't. Too prideful. Too stubborn. Every guy with a trained mindset would be able to figure that out. 2 ladies stopped him dead in his tracks. Turning his face, he gave them a friendly smile. Not too forced. Yes, Issei Hayadu. With a nod, he showed his proper respect. Correct. Now, sorry to ask, but who are you 2? The speaker was a young lady with a slim figure, her black hair in a bob cut, and she had violet eyes. Those hid the strictest way to handle the place. The other girl, next to her, was quiet. She wore glasses as the speaker did. Her hair was long and straight. That would have been a pain to handle if Issei were to guess. Her eyes were heterothermic, and if Issei paid attention, he would have been taken by the figure. Nice one. King and Queen, he wondered. I'm Sona Shirtorai, student council president of this school. Now, could you please follow us? We still need to get some details sorted before we can assign you to your class. Issei was drilled into with proper respect, and unlike some, he saw no reason not to offer that. One caught more bees with honey than with vinegar. And he wasn't going into a fight when that was not needed. All right, lead the way. During the walk, they kept quiet, and that suited him fine. He was keeping his eyes peeled when he looked around. He kept his nose open as well. He could smell the devils. Sona and her peerage were one thing, but they didn't interest him that much. The other smell did. Oh, that was something else. Different ones, but he kept his mouth shut for the time being. There would be a time and place. Besides that, he saw the girls outnumbering the boys. Turning this place co-ed? Really? Was that the best course of action? He followed Sona around. Posh place, he had to say. Turning the third stairs up, he found that girls were staring at him. Turning his head, he found that he saw the most beautiful red hair. But he missed it right passing. Something wrong? Nope. Sorry, thought I saw someone I knew. That caused Sona to raise an eyebrow. You lived here? You lived here? In this city? Issei found that a white lie was good enough to tell her. Well, yep. Till my 5th. Wasn't that in my report? It would be rare to get the drop onto Sona. That made it all the sweeter when he saw her. Indeed. Did you live with your uncle in Hokkaido? What about your parents, my folks? When I passed the house, they were on holiday. We kind of fell out of contact. It happens. Issei was bullshitting his way through her, and he was glad that Sona believed him. One of the 10 commandments was not to lie, but for Issei, he found that half-truths weren't on the same page. Besides, there was nothing wrong there. I see. Could you please follow me to this room? The doors opened and he would crack an overdone joke. Issei left it out though. The place was largely Victorian style. Issei found it was rarely to his liking, but he could live with the whole thing. Desks around where the council could work on while he was sure that he could smell water. Was someone brewing tea? In the front was one large desk where Sona took a seat. On the other side was another seat. Take a seat. She pointed at the one standing while the other lady, Issei didn't catch her name just yet, stood behind her. Thank you. Slinging his backpack from his shoulders, the young man sat down. His eyes were circling around and his nose was breathing in. The distinct scent of a dragon lingered around. Not Drake, that was for damn sure. He would think of someone else. His scent let him think of something else. Vritra? Maybe. He would have to ask his partner who laid asleep in his arm. Now, can I ask you a few questions? Sona wasn't letting up, so he would be polite but not charming. Sure thing. Ask right away. I read in your information. You came from Hokkaido. Issei nodded to her. It was something that he kept hidden. I lived in Hokkaido. With my uncle. Originally, I'm from here. I moved in there because my parents were moving around a lot. During the holidays, we would often be in Italy. He had to find a link to the land of pizza and wine. Italy? Where exactly? Sona asked, hoping that it wasn't Rome. That would be too dangerous. Siena. A small place around Florence. They got the best ice cream I ever had. Sona raised an eyebrow in that regard. She wasn't a sweet tooth, but she could ask around. I see. So why did you come back here? When the heart calls you home, you have to answer it. That glare made it clear that she wasn't pleased with that. This is one of the only 2 places that I have known as home. Hard to go somewhere else. And well, when I heard that this school went co-ed, I found that a good reason to come here. Didn't have to waste time on commute. Sona had seen his grades. They weren't exceptional, but he got through and never had too many problems. I see. Well, in that case, I see no reasons to keep you here. Tsubaki, could you escort him to his classroom? Issei looked back at her. Tsubaki, so that was her name. Pretty one as well. Of course, Issei Hayadu. I am president of this school because I love this place. If there is something that you want to talk about or you need me for, my door is always open. Issei nodded to her. I'll be sure to keep it in mind, thank you, Shitori Kaishu. With that, Issei walked off next to Tsubaki. Sona sat back in her seat. Issei's story checked out on many levels. Plus, he wasn't drooling over her. His eyes weren't wandering, but they kept to her face. Polite, and he didn't have any magic on him. She was certain that he was good, yet her guts were telling her a different story. So she could wait and see how that turned out. If Issei proved to be of value, she would let Rias go first. Her best friend needed that more than she did. Scene change. Just like before, the walk is quiet to the place. Issei didn't mind it one bit that they kept quiet. He would look around and found that it was good enough for him. Eventually, they ended up at his class 2C. This is the classroom. As Sona Kaisha said, if you need anything, don't be a stranger. Issei nodded to her, but his soft grin meant something else. Meh, I have always been on my own. I'll be fine, but if I need help, I'll be sure to ask you. Thank you, senpai. And with that, Tsubaki walked off. Issei found that she was nice to a degree. Not fully his type, but still. Then he knocked on the door. Long black hair with a friendly expression opened it. Ah, Issei Hayadu-kun? Speaking too. I'm your Megara-sensei. Your homeroom teacher. Please come in. only in the class. It was clear now that the school was a former only girls' school. There were only around 4 guys, and from those 4, one showed a friendly smile to him. Issei returned it with a polite nod. That guy was a devil. A knight, maybe? He just wasn't sure. Okay, class. This is Issei Hayadu. Go ahead, Issei Hayadu. I'll be in your care. The student went back while he looked the group over. There were some girls already eyeing him up. Rarely he was as grateful as right now that he had good training under his belt. Hayadu, if I wasn't mistaken, you lived aboard, right? Hokkaido. But my roots lie here. Although I doubt I remember my elementary school buddies. The sheepish look made him a bit cuter if she was honest. But the lady shook her head. Any questions for our next member? What are your impressions of the school? What are your hobbies? What is your relationship status? Can you please die? We have enough pretty boys already in this school. The asker of that question was smashed by a piece of chalk, and Issei would never get on Yamegura-sensei. I find it okay so far. I like being outside and driving, earned my license. I am single so far, and dying doesn't fit in my schedule. Alright, if that is everything. There is only one spot open. That was on the front of the classroom. There went his daydreaming. It could give his brain some work to do. He had been challenged before. Scene change. Issei found that school had certainly changed compared to his younger years. Nothing that he couldn't handle. At least, there was enough eye candy for him. Girls were looking all over him. But there were limits to how far Issei would piss off the guys. So when the day went by, Issei walked outside. There was a part of him that was glad about the hot weather. Sitting outside in the blazing sun, it gave him a way to think and have quietness. It wasn't the heat of Italy, but it could pass. He looked up to the sky. Now, how to find Asia and rescue her? Issei knew that he had to come up with a plan. But then he heard some perverted giggling. Sharp ears, honed by years of training and experience. Following the sounds, he ended up at a dojo. Some dojo if his nose were telling him what he needed to know. There were 2 of his class, looking through a hole. Issei could beat them, but he found that there were others who were right to handle them. Quietly, he moved away from the 2 and up to the door. His sharp ears told Issei that there were showers running. Knocking a few times, the door was flung open. An attractive brunette with yellow eyes opened. Her wary look changed when she saw Issei standing. Hayada-kun, do I know you? The man asked. I'm a classmate of yours. My name is Murayama Kirishima. With an apologetic look, Issei blinked at her. You gotta forgive me. I am not that great with names. Now, I don't want to be a killjoy, but I think you got unwanted guests. Turning her head around, the young lady shouted in the room. Everyone out! Those pervs are at it again. The showers were fled and girls in several stages of cleaning dressed to give those pervs their trashing. Murayama stayed behind as she kept guard over Issei. She gave the young man a wary look. So why did you come here? To get a good look yourself at us. Issei didn't find her suspicions unfounded. Murayama-san, I am the type of young man that admires a lady's body and beauty as much as every other man. My difference lies in that beauty has to be admired and earned. What those pieces of human excrement are doing is completely against my principles. Leaning in closer, the whisper in her ear caused her to turn red. Besides, if I want to see you, you can expect me to pull out all the stops. And with that said, Issei left the building and the blushing girl. It didn't take long before Murayama joined her friends. Meanwhile, Issei's walk ended him up at another building. Even with Albion sealed inside, his own instincts told him to look up. His yellow eyes landed on one of the most beautiful creatures that he had ever seen in his entire life. And in his case, that was saying something. Beautiful crimson hair that was longer than Issei could have seen from her spot. She was standing at the window, looking outside. She had a bit of a haughty look while she was looking at him. Her blue eyes shined at him, and her skin was one of the snow whitest he had ever seen. There was one strand of her hair standing up. Their eyes met, and Issei could feel a pull to her. Something in her eyes softened while she looked back at Issei. He could feel that something was on her mind. But with that, the lady moved herself back in. Hey, Akino. Inside, Rias Gremory flung herself back in front of the chessboard. Yes, Rias. A soft voice said while a black-haired beauty stood behind the couch. Her figure could compete with Rias' own. One could mistake them for sisters given the fact that their bodies were much the same. Slender but with great S and tight asses. She was also wearing the Kuoh Academy uniform. Did we have any new transfer students? Sona told me that there was one. Hokkaido. Issei Hayadu. Brown hair, 2nd year. So far, she had nothing on him. Why? Rias was silent. She couldn't fathom what she was feeling deep inside her chest when their eyes met. Issei's body was hidden by the clothes, but she could think that he was pretty fit. There was something more. Issei. So that was his name. It was a weird, fuzzy feeling that Rias experienced. Her chest was bubbling up and her mind was set on him. Rias. She felt a tap on her shoulder. It was like she was shocked when Aquino touched her. She didn't doubt that her queen wouldn't be using electricity to get Rias' attention. Yes. My apologies, Aquino. I was preoccupied, naughty Rias. Thinking of that Issei boy? Her queen walked around and circled her arms around her neck. I think we'll ask Sona tonight where he comes from. Something of him speaks to me. The blushing face told Aquino all she needed to know, but she would keep that for later. When they had an audience, it would be fun to tease Rias with her crush. It might do her some good. Her king needed something to get her mind of. And this Issei was speaking to her. It must mean something. And if Rias was saved, the same could be said about her own life. Meanwhile, Issei felt his heart racing while his mind was processing. Sure, he was used to beautiful ladies, a perk of his job, but even one like the redhead that he just saw. No, not red. Crimson. Her hair was crimson as the red leaves on the maple trees he saw back in the States. Man, he missed Silas now. The man might be a big talker, but when things came down, there were few who used a gun like him. But there was more. Something spoke to him when he saw the lady. And it didn't take long before he figured out who the woman was that he just saw. Rias Gremory. The only one I know with that red hair is Gremory. Man, that is something. But when the bell rang, he moved back to his class. Before even the homeroom teacher came in, he sat on his desk. Issei found that he lived by his principles. Beauty had to be admired. And Rias was easily of the most beautiful he had ever seen. Scene skip. When the school went by, Issei noticed the groups leaving while the perverts were glaring at him. It was like they figured out that he sold them out. Before he left, he got an invitation to the kendo club. Most likely at the behest of Murayama. Friendly of her, but he wasn't interested in joining such a club. Issei walked back home while his eyes went back to the school. For some reason, he knew that Sona would be coming over to Rias to talk about him. It was a question of when and not if he would reveal himself. But it would be on his terms. And despite the fact that she was a beauty, Issei was not going to go after Rias. Asia came first on his mind. But the only question was where she was. He had no leads and it wasn't like he could ask the devils. So he was going on his own. It was on automatic pilot that he walked back home. Okay, first deal with this mountain of homework. Used to working under pressure, Issei finished the annoying paperwork and raced outside. With a helmet on his face, Issei got the motorcycle and drove out. While still minding the speed limits, he drove through the city. Sunset was always one of his most favorite times of the day. That and sunrise. While in the east, it always went by fast. In the west, evening light could take hours. Issei drove to a bridge where the trains were passing. It was where he and his father were train spotting. Besides flying, it was the preferred way for Issei. He loved the high speed, the way how things looked. Looking over it, he found that it was fine like this. The cycle stood against the railing. He wished he could have some music. Excuse me? Turning his head, he was greeted by a girl with long black hair. Her violet eyes shined at him. It was like they were playing something innocent, but Issei knew better. He thanked his paranoia to keep Albion hidden for a while. The girl was wearing a dark red jacket with the letter P embroidered in gold, a white undershirt, a matching red bow, and a green skirt. Issei briefly wondered if she was from another school. If she came from a school, this was a fallen angel, disguised as a human. Issei was sure about it, but he found that something was weird. She was familiar. Where did he see that combination before? Yes, Issei asked while the girl looked back at him. Do you have a girlfriend? Oh, he could see where this was going. His head began to think about where he saw her before while he kept his cool. For the time being, no. There were so many half-truths today. One more wouldn't hurt. Then, would you like to date me? Issei knew that this was something dangerous. Fallen angels, like this lady, often hunted in packs. But he should be able to take care of them. Plus, given how Asia fell from grace, they would be the most likely contestants to take her in. Sure. But before we start to date, what is your name? I'm Issei. Issei Hayadu, Yuma. Yuma Amano. Thank you, Issei-kun. Issei pondered on it for a second. Say, how about we go on a date? Does Sunday work for you? Around noon? That is awesome. She chirped at him while he gave her a small smile. I'll look forward to it. After they exchanged numbers, he saw her off. He knew how to prepare for it, and he could work things out. He could change the date around. And with that, Issei went off on his motorcycle. He would probably need a new helmet. Meanwhile, back at school. So is this about our newest transfer student? Sona asked while the two were in a chess game. Both were equally matched. Don't tell me that you were taken in by him. Rias had her arms crossed underneath her ample bust. See, I told you, Tsubaki. She's in love. Akino had her hands on her burning cheeks while she was swooning. The great Rias Gremory is falling for a normal boy. Rias ignored Akino while she moved a pawn. I don't think he is normal, Sona said. Nothing you noticed. In times like these, they could stop the game to discuss important things. Sona took off her glasses and cleaned them. His backstory checks out. Either it's the truth or he went through an awful lot of trouble to get there. Rias sat back with an arched eyebrow. You think he is lying? Even with the information turning up? Sona rolled her eyes when she heard the accusation. If he is special because of how much he tries to hide it, he is. You can have him. You are in hotter water than I am. But my guts tell me that there is something to him, and that was something that both Rias and Sona could agree on. Meanwhile, the object of their conversation was moving through the city on his bike. Man, this place had changed a whole lot. The local noodle stand was open after 10 p.m. Issei knew that place. It hadn't changed, and his face had changed over the years. So he began to eat. It saved going out on dinner, and while he didn't need much sleep, there were a few hours that this dragon needed. Albion would be filled in later. There was a lot, but the vanishing dragon knew that he could trust his host. There were many others who had drilled one important lesson into Issei. There is someone better out there. He had kept those lessons to heart. Knowing your foe was one thing, never underestimate them. Issei found that she was too pretty a face to take down. If only he could figure out where he saw her before, but that was for later. Right now, he had to sleep a bit. Before he would sleep, he dissolved the sign of Albion. Hey there, evening partner. Slept well, Albion, like a log. I enjoy those seals. So any news? Scored a date with a fallen angel, and I think that Rias Gremory likes me. All in one day? Damn. It appears that your growth has finally set in. You talking about me finally getting a harem. Weird how you view that. Issei had heard the stories of the wielders of the divine dividing, and the boosted gear attracted women of all sorts. The dragon had often teased Issei that despite the fact that he got laid a lot, he hadn't matured yet. A serious harem. We have been doing that for eons. Since the dawn of time. Might be. But for now, enjoy the time off. That fallen is my link to Asia, and that is another girl on your list. The week went by. Issei found that the week went by fast when you had fun. Girls were asking around on him, but he would keep his distance for now. If you wanted to go somewhere, you aimed high. What he also experienced was that he was being followed. There was nothing more fun than to plop down next to a startled spy. But if that said spy was an adorable first year who loved snacking and enjoyed the silence as much as he did, that worked for him. Kaneko Tuju, he learned her name fast, was most likely an rook in Rias' peerage. And well, he could get why Rias would be after him. But for him, he liked his privacy. Kaneko might be on him, but he found no reason not to enjoy being around her. They would often sit in silence, watching the clubs. When he learned that she was a sweet tooth, he would bring Pokey along. They would share in silence while they watched the time go by. He wouldn't reveal about Rias, but it was just something. But he would talk later to them because for now, he had to focus on a date. There was a part of him that was glad he brought over a motor suit. He dressed up in that completely, and he knew that Yuma, or whatever the hell her name was, would be impressed by the show underneath. He was wearing a shirt though, and some loose trousers that hugged him tightly. It was a good thing they met at noon. The place was already blazing again, but for Issei, that didn't matter. Soon, Yuma showed up in a purple dress. It matched her eyes well, a short jacket. Luckily, she wore longer leggings. Hey there, Issei-kun. She looked at the Yamaha behind him. Her mouth fell open when she saw the vehicle. Is that yours? Yep. I thought to go for a spin. He hopped on and presented her with a helmet. I should have told you about the clothes. But they are well. Now get on. They wouldn't leave for 2 minutes before Yuma figured out how to wear the helmet on. She could feel how strong Issei was, but also how gentle that he carried her. When they got in, she only heard the words "hold on tight" before they flew off. Issei chose out of town when they drove fast by the place. The woman had flown before, but this was such a radical change from her usual flight. It was something out of a dream as Issei drove by fast. She laughed. She couldn't believe that this was real. Tight turns and fast passes went by as Yuma felt how Issei controlled it. She could see why humanity loved driving those vehicles. They drove by the city as Issei had found a good destination to go. What do you think of it? Issei shouted back at her while they passed cars by in a fast and elegant way. It was clear how much she began to enjoy this adventure with Issei. They did stop to eat at a nice bench. They could overlook the roads like this. Issei was a thoughtful gentleman. He had packed lunches and Yuma found that he could cook well. There was some different food. What is the sweet things? They were rolls of dough with some cheese between them, cannoli. My uncle and I spent our time in Italy. I learned to cook there. Issei also remembered the video games that he played back then. Oh, he had good times with that cooking. I have to say that you're a very good cook. He blushed a bit. Being praised in the sack was one thing, but being told that his cooking was good was always something that Issei really appreciated. Thanks. He cracked 2 cans of soft drinks. She smiled back at him. Yuma admitted. She was enjoying this way too much. After they had their lunch, they sat back. Issei foresaw that if they would hop on the motorcycle now, they would be rechewing their lunch, and that would be a disservice to the great food they just had. They just enjoyed each other's company. For a change of pace, it was the girl who was laying her head in the lap. Man, she really enjoyed this date. A bit too much. Something in her hoped that she didn't have to kill him after all. Eventually, they ended up at the top of the mountain. It was right on time to see the valleys down below. The sight of it was beautiful and imposing. Yuma had no idea how this planet that she had known so well could be looking like this. What do you think of it? Issei asked as he also looked back at it. This is incredible. Issei-kun, you knew about this? The man scratched his head when he looked it over. Well, I have read about it and heard stories about it. So I wanted to see this. Yuma sighed and she hopped off the bike. I had a lot of fun, Issei-kun. She walked to the road. I was hoping for something like this. Then she looked back at Issei. Her look changed. I was wondering if you could do something for me. The dragon raised an eyebrow. What might that be? His instincts were going off and he released Albion from his slumber. Would you die for me? And with that, the fallen angel changed into her real form. Older, mature. More filled out, and for a second, he saw her eyes flashing at him. Then he saw how her clothes changed. Some leather straps that Issei would find more appropriate in a bedroom than on the battlefield. So now you show your real form. He saw her face. Issei still wasn't sure where he had seen her before. But it began to clear up. But to answer your question. Issei put his bike away and he looked back at her. Dying doesn't fit in my schedule. His sacred gear appeared on his arm. Her mouth dropped open as she saw it. Divine dividing? She looked horribly shocked by seeing the sacred gear appear on his arm. She had no idea that he had one, let alone one of the strongest ones out there. Oh, so you know about my sacred gear. Good, that makes things a lot easier. Looking back at her, he began to show off his powers. It circled around him as he was using his powers. The energy circled around him as the fallen angel's mouth dropped open. Now, what are you going to do? Besides, what is your real name? I doubt that Yuma would be that. Her eyes shined at the sacred gear, while she had no idea about this. Of course, she had heard the missions that Issei was a threat to the fallen angels and that he should be killed. But the reports also had that the Hakuryuku was employed by the Vatican. She heard, however, the question, and she knew that there was no way that she could defeat Issei. Rainier. I think that you should know the name of the one who killed you. Grinning back at her, it showed off to her. We both know that is not going to happen. He smirked at her while Rainier glared back at him. Don't get why. She threw the spear at him, while Issei just stood back and flicked it aside. Still, with a pleasant smile on his face, Rainier gulped when she saw the eyes. They promised the message. Go ahead. You will not like the results. Now, can you put those things away and we can talk like civilized beings? You enjoyed this a bit too much to put on an act, and I really hate to kill a pretty girl like yourself. But then his sacred gear showed off and his 2 arms were coated by white gauntlets. But if push comes to shove, I won't be above it. Rainier knew that she was far, far outweighed by the presence. Hell, even if they had all here, they wouldn't be able to put a dent on him. But Issei hadn't gone aggressive. He was assertive and it showed off, but she didn't get any feeling of anger towards her. Was that compassion? She decided to go for broke. Landing in front of him, Rainier watched over him. The fallen angel had heard of what dragons could do and that they were something else. She was inclined to agree with them. Now, can you tell me why you wanted to kill me? The angel felt how his eyes were wandering over her body. She found that she could come to like the attention. That was done because of the threat that you had in your body. That guy needs to get sacked. Rolling her eyes at him, she was inclined to agree. That guy really ate up there. You are telling me. She touched the gauntlet. This was real. I couldn't have imagined that you were a dragon. This makes one change. Raising an eyebrow, Issei leaned towards her. She would let him handle this because despite how he acted, she was in serious trouble. It does indeed. Now, Rainier. I want to ask you. Do you want to kill me? Want? Not really? Can impossible. Need? I am afraid so. She looked into his yellow eyes. She could read that things would be all right. You know that isn't true. But I would like to ask what a fallen angel is doing so far from home. I take you're in Kuoh to receive Asia Argento. Recently excommunicated by the church. Rainier could never make good money on being a poker player. Yeah. And I am really not looking forward to that. I have killed too many ones and I'm wary of that. Then we have to change that. But going against your masters will get you killed. Although. Issei pondered for a second. I can take you in. In her eyes, Issei read something that was akin to hope. But Issei hated squashing that hope. I want to save Asia as well. So here is what you are going to do. Go back to the church. I'll be there to save you. Is Asia there yet? Rainier felt that her legs were giving out. This had been too much. A way out. Out of this life? She could be free? No. Not yet. Issei began to formulate a plan. A simple one, but there weren't that many things that could go wrong with it. In that case, I would like you to do this. Go back to the church. When Asia rolls around, I'll get you out. You, Asia, anyone, I'll save you? She began to think about the devils. They wouldn't let things go this easily without a fight, especially because they were extensively rogues who were staying in that church. That the dumb who made this plan would get an inoperable tumor at the base of his spine. But the devils. Don't worry. I'll sort things out. You got my word. Rainier couldn't believe that a ticket out would come this easily. She flung herself on Issei, and when the greedy claimed his own, Issei felt that as a surprise but a welcome one. Thank you, Rainier said when she felt the leaving her own. You're welcome. The night was still young and they could find a place later. So you would like to end this night on a bang? The fallen angel got a look of lust in her eyes. That could be a great way to end it. She could smell how Issei was aroused by her appearance, and well, they had nothing to lose now. Rainier barked a laugh when she heard that line. Sure. Let's do this. But well. Issei spread his wings and she could see the white bones stretch out like a skeleton while he released a seal on the place. That way, we can without any problem. Again, he pressed a kiss on her. She felt how he filled her mouth with his tongue. They edged away to a tree that stood a bit further. Issei slid down to it, and she followed. Their hands began to wander around each other. His shirt went off and the leather straps were foregone. Issei found that Rainier had an excellent set of S. The fallen angel found that Issei was looking better than most men that she ever laid with. And if she had to swear her eternal love to him, she could perfectly live with that. After that, his trouser went off. Her mouth dropped open and she began to salivate. Issei was bigger than most she had ever seen. She wasn't unsoiled. No, her reason for falling wasn't lust. Not that it stopped her to explore the sins. And the pleasure of the flesh was something she was more than used to. But she wouldn't be taking Issei's immediately in her mouth. Not that he minded her S wrapped around them. Now, isn't this going a bit too fast? She looked back at him and Issei's eyes had mirth that she should get used to. Bad thing? Nope. Go ahead. And with that, she began to add saliva that made it a whole lot easier to move. Her S moved up and down while Rainier worked Issei over. He let his hips buck while she squeezed the S as tight as she could. Issei always preferred women who had a bit less of their bodies but knew how to use it exactly. Meanwhile, she used her mouth to on it as well. There was enough of his sticking out her cleavage that it was more than his head sticking out. Man, she found that she was the calmest now. The soothing scent and his groans made it clear how much he was enjoying this. She used her tongue on him while Issei bucked against her. He found that supernatural species were always better at this kind of thing than most beings were. You like this? Been a bit too long since I had any. Now, that was interesting. They would be talking a lot more. Eventually, she could feel how Issei was getting on his limit. She had the hakuryuka between her S. This was just one great evening, but she wanted to prolong this, so she slowed a bit down and then went back to. She used this hit and run that proved highly effective. Issei enjoyed to a degree as well while his hands began to explore her S. They were spilling out his hands. Man, they were just great. Not too big with just enough perkiness to them. Can you work this over? What? She teased as she let one hand push him down. If you don't hurry up, we can't continue. And believe me, you'd like that. Now, that was one promise of rapture. His eyes shined with ecstasy. Oh, she could live with that. She could feel her own loins burning, so she worked him over. Issei clearly hadn't seen too much action as his began to strain against her S. With his head firmly between her, she felt the release of him coming. He would paint the two of them with his seed. She could live with that. Gonna. A grunt, more akin to an animal than man, escaped his mouth. Her mouth was bloated with his seed while the rest spilled out over them. You weren't joking. Then she saw his eyes. He grabbed Rainier by the shoulders and with gentleness that she hadn't expected, Issei moved her. Issei could have thrown her against the tree, but his gentleness wasn't a mistake for weakness. Rainier did not want to find out what would happen if she resisted. The dragon ignored the forest where he laid on, and from between her legs he looked at her. Fingers, mouth, or a combination? Was he taking her order? Oh, she would be greedy. Both. Her assertiveness made it enough for Issei. This was going to be fun. First, he began to off the excess. He found that she was already enough, but he wanted to enjoy her taste. When the rest was gone, his tongue penetrated her. His index fingers worked her over as well. They soothed the burning fire. She was heating up like a furnace. Her legs wrapped around his legs and her hands began to pull on his hair. Issei was long used to that kind of treatment, and he just ed and ed on her. Her S echoed through the trees, and while he knew that no human could hear her, the birds would be flying up. Issei found that he enjoyed her reactions. He had to rely on his ears though. The eyes were focused on her special spot. She looked awesome down there as well. She felt awesome as well. His tongue would have been crushed were it not for his training, and her S reached higher. It was a good way to explore her body before they would actually. Her legs moved faster on his while his head bobbed up and down. Then he began to use some more speed on her. Speed was only added to it while she grinned at the amount of experience that he had been using. She used her arms to prop herself up to look at him while she let him work over her. Her eyes began to roll up while she looked at him. Oh, his experience wasn't lacking. He would need some training to get the rustiness off. But he was there. Good learner, and he was getting there again. Eventually, she would break down. The heat spread around her body, a delightful feeling of warmth from her crotch to the rest of her body. Rainier relaxed when she was done. She spread her legs further for him. His head recovered from the feeling. Both felt some chill despite the heat in their bodies. They would need to figure out how to soothe each other. Ready? If you chicken out now, I am going to kill you, and Issei wouldn't blame her. So when his head was aimed at her, he shoved his full length in at one go. Rainier had her mouth drop open and her echoed in his throat. She found that Issei was going through this for a good reason. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head. His hands wandered around her body. Man, those S were awesome, and she knew that as well. Issei didn't move while he kissed her. It did a lot for her to enjoy this, but she would need some adjustment. Sorry. It's been a while for you as well. She nodded and Issei smiled back at her. That can happen. Just relax, okay? She forced her body to go limp while Issei let her get used to him. His was grinding just a bit in her while he tried to be as still as possible. After a few tense moments, she nodded to him. You can move, but please be gentle. Noted. She had heard those words before, and they were never taken seriously. Now it was. She felt the contained strength while Issei slowly worked around her body. He was taking good care of it. Rainier just let Issei go over her. Slow but deliberate, Issei at her while she began to move her legs with him. Her hips worked with him, and Rainier found that it was just good. They made love instead of ing like wild animals. Issei wasn't trying to claim her as his nature would tell her, but he was taking it easy and just wanted her to get used to him. One day he would claim her, but now they would make love. Issei was pushing in the right places. Her hands grabbed him again for a greedy kiss. And that was good for him. They just stayed ing like that, exploring her body while the two just enjoyed each other. When they let go of their mouth, Issei teased her nose. Both had to grin when they felt that. I think this is the beginning of something beautiful. Issei wondered if she ever watched Casablanca or if she spent time on the internet. That would be a riot. But for Issei, it was something that he could worry about later. Time had slipped them by, and the time had changed for them. A small part of them wished that they could stay like this forever. But both felt that they held it off for long enough. Rainier was first to come undone on him. Her moves began to go more erratic and Issei could easily wait, but he also wanted to reach an end. Then he heard a polite cough. Both wondered about it and ignored it. Again, an insistent cough sounded, and that brought them down to the fact their barrier had fallen. Turning his head, Rainier felt her insides turn to ice when crimson-red hair and green-blue eyes shined at the two. Issei had immediately figured out who was standing. He wished that it wasn't Rias Gremory who found him balls deep in a fallen angel. A race that she was trained to hate. Gremory-senpai. Before you and I talk, could you please wait until? He found his release as he came inside Rainier's. He flooded them, and it was like his rock went off. He pulled out and looked at her. You want to join in or what? The two women had a mouth that fell open. It didn't sound like such a bad deal if they ignored the obvious. Issei was just joking when he asked Rias to join in, but with how she looked at him, there was something clear that Rias was seriously considering. Okay, jokes aside. Turn around now, please. I'd like to get dressed. With a smirk, Rias looked at him. Why? I believe that you owe me an explanation, Issei. First name base already? She was going back at him for teasing him, but Issei found there was a time and place for everything. Gremory-senpai, I believe in a principle that beauty has to be admired. If I want to see a lady, I'll pull out all the stops for her. But I also expect those principles to be applied to myself. You have seen me already. But now turn around. Issei's glare made it even more clear. Rias wasn't sure what power came from him. Very well. Don't run away. Issei grinned. Don't worry, I got questions for you as well. Issei turned to his date who had been frozen. Rainier gulped when her eyes laid claim on the crimson-haired ruined princess. She had heard the stories of the little sister of Lucifer. Her powers were already developing and here she was, in the vicinity of her, and more than capable of destroying her. Her eyes caught Issei, and her felt his. It caused her to have warm courage to flow in her veins. Don't worry. I'll keep you safe. I promise you. Right. Rainier nodded to him. She just hoped that he meant that. If she could be honest, Issei was the more dangerous being that Rias. Or at least, more powerful. She dressed with magic while Issei changed into his clothes as a normal being. And unlike Rias, he allowed her to sneak a few glances at him. Especially given the fact that he looked so good. When he was back in his shirt and loose trousers, he turned to Rias. Okay, we are decent. Rias couldn't keep her eyes off him. He looked handsome. That much was clear. And it was a difference how he was like this. She also counted in the fact that she liked the sight of him. He was confident to a point of being wise without being arrogant. Assertive maybe. A warrior. Now, can you tell me how you got through here? I think I put up a barrier on this. Rias rolled her eyes. Please, I have been keeping tabs on you. When you sit next to my rook, every time you got free time, it becomes all too easy. Issei sighed. He should have known. But well, there was little harm in that. The white dragon wanted to be friendly with the devils and now, he had a way for that. So you just pinned me. That doesn't sound creepy at all. Or should I be honored that Rias Gremory is stalking me? The tightened jaw, the subtle glare, and the tick on her forearm while they were crossed. Issei was annoying her, but he was also unhappy with how she managed to track him. I think that you should keep in mind that I am the overseer of this town. All residents are under my protection. Issei glanced back at Rainier. Really now? So what do you want? A medal? Answers. What are you really, Issei Hayato? The dragon just smirked as he deployed his white gauntlet. This should explain that. You're this generation Hakuryuku. Rias hadn't expected Issei to be that. She had guessed that he would be powerful, but not this. Not one of the two heavenly dragons. Yep. I haven't really lied to the student council. Rias raised an eyebrow while Issei just scoffed. Come on. I know they're devils as well. And I'd be an idiot that they haven't told you already about me. They did. They told me that you lived in Kuoh before. But you moved to Hokkaido. At this, Issei looked slightly embarrassed. Well, I lived here. But I didn't move to Hokkaido. Rias' hands moved to her shapely hips and she expected Issei to continue his story. He was 1 foot in the door, now he had to move the rest in. I lived in the Vatican where I trained with this sacred gear. Been employed by them for over a decade. Reason for leaving? A girl that I am mighty fond of, was excommunicated on idiotic claims. From what I heard through the grapevine, she ended up in this place. Rias wanted to ask but found her question answered by Rainier. He's talking about Asia Argento. The Holy Priestess. And how would you know that? It appears that I have some unwanted guests on my territory. Her eyes flamed when she saw the fallen angel. The princess really wasn't happy with her. Or the fact that she got to Issei first. Of course, you'd complain about that. Can't expect anything less from the little sister of the Satan Lucifer, before you two start making a mess. Don't. Issei's voice showed that he had little time or patience for a magical catfight. I have learned throughout the years that all you magical beings got a lot in common. So don't start. Rias wanted to protest but found that Issei was right. He could take her on easily. You and I, Rainier, we got a goal that we can combine. You want out of this life, and I want Asia alive. So that would be able to combine. Turning to Rias, Issei sighed. He hated making deals, but he knew better than to piss off the Satans. Especially because he didn't have the backings of the church or Michael. Asia Argento is being kept at the church that Rainier and her friends are. I go in, rescue those who want to be saved, and kill the rest. Rias gave him a softer smile. And what do you offer me in return for turning a blind eye to the inevitable carnage that you will cause, my Grodd? And my services. I'll help you and Sona out when that is needed. And no, I do not want to be turned into one of your servants. Issei replied, and Rias' eyes lit up. Just a bit. Just the tiniest light that Rias revealed. He had seen it before. And Issei had a good feeling that just like Asia, she was in a serious pinch. That is something, yes. I can live with that. Issei wondered what she needed his help for, but it could wait. Something in his gut told him that if he played this right, he would be more than in the door with them. Okay, what do we now, Issei? Rainier asked. Go back to the church, tell them you killed me. When Asia is there, I'll save you. When will she be there? Next week. All the rogue priests and the rest of us will be there as well. I want you to save me, Kalwarner and Middlet. Asia as well. The rest of them. Well, I prefer that my past is closed. Issei nodded to her, and he looked back at Rias. Can you inform Citri about what is going to happen? Rias nodded back at him. Very well. I'll let you handle this. But after this, we will check up. Issei felt that he had to think things over with Asia. Even if she got out alive at church, there would be reprisals. He could take care of himself and maybe some fallen angel, but a former holy maiden from the church? Yeah, that might be tricky. Works for me. Now, do you want me to drop you off at home? Rainier shook her head and she changed into her adult form. Sorry, but nope. I'll see you next week, my hero. After a long and loving kiss, Issei felt that he got really lucky. And with that, she flew off. Turning to Rias, his knowing look made it clear that she got the same offer. Well, it would be one new thing to learn. Offering her the same helmet as he used on Rainier, he hopped onto his bike. Get on. And it proved to be an excellent thrill ride for Rias as Issei raced down the hill. He had to spend a week in isolation. With some luck, he could make things work out fine for the entire school. Hypnotizing the school shouldn't be an issue. Where to in Kuoh? I'll direct you, Rias shouted back at him. He could hear the giddiness in her voice. They could say what they want, but mankind really knew how to make the best vehicles. It wasn't a surprise that Rias' home was a small vehicle. When she got off, she looked disappointed. That was fun. Issei bowed his head to her. You're welcome. Hey, do you mind if we exchange phone numbers? I'll let you know when I start my raid. That would be doable. Good luck. Issei wanted to kiss her but felt that there would be a time and place for that. And those are 2 more for your harem. Of course, now, Albion would let himself be known. Shut it. Issei replied back to him as he turned his back around. While he couldn't be in school for a week, Issei would use the week of isolation to scout the church, despite having one of the most powerful, sacred gears in existence. Issei had learned many magical tricks. One of them was to conceal. Another one was what he liked to scan. He learned the layout of the building. These were tricks that he learned from older fighters. Reconnaissance, scouting, examining, making plans. Of course, he could just ram his way through the building and fight his way through. But he needed Asia alive. He kept Rias posted. Luckily, the crimson-haired ruined princess had more than just a pretty face. He trusted her to keep the other devils informed. And out of his way when he wrecked the church, and he hoped that Rainier knew what she was doing because he got some texts from her. The photos of her friends came through. He really liked the image of Kalwarner. Middlet was another story. She did have some fashion sense, not to mention a really nice body. Besides that, Issei kept focusing his powers to make sure that he was hidden. Patience was a virtue, and he had learned it very well. Throughout the days, he saw more and more priests arriving. One took his interest. The rest didn't so much. He was a cut above the others. In his instability and his powers. But that was what he could do. Only sit and wait until he knew that Asia would be there. Scene skip. Issei laid sleeping in his bed. If he could be honest, he could say that sleeping was the only thing that he really took seriously. It was one of the things that he adored doing. But when he heard his phone ringing in the middle of the night, Issei jolted up. He looked at the caller. Rainier wouldn't call him in the middle of the night just for no reason. Ray, what the? Issei, not good. They found out about our deal. My friends agree on it, but he heard an explosion and some shattering of windows. Come over here now. It appeared that he could play the hero that he so despised of being. Well, it would give him some hot babes. Sending a text to Rias, Issei just opened his window and flew out of the room, in just his boxer. Albion, balance breaker, will do partner. Vanishing dragon, balance breaker. Issei felt the armor building around him as he flew to the church. The armor around him encased his entire body. Blue jewels were around him, and his wings came out to show off. They lit up the night. Asia, please be alive. Issei crashed into the doors, and just like he had expected, he was greeted by numerous priests. Well, it looks like we got our honor guest. The unhinged one spoke to him, and Issei's eyes glanced around. I'll give you all one chance to walk away with your lives. Give me Asia and the fallen angels. Loud laughter echoed through the church. Issei waited until they were done laughing. At least they would go to hell with smiles on their faces. This is funny. One of the priests couldn't stop laughing. Yeah, where does he think he is making demands? Issei's eyes zoned in on all of them. Very well then. Before they could even see what happened to them, Issei smashed through them like they were made out of tissue paper. He didn't even get to have fun with them. He looked back and saw that the only thing was carnage. You, Issei just said while he turned to the secret entrance. Subtlety was now long out of the window. One or two of the priests could still be alive, but Issei couldn't care less about that. He raced through the stairs. The advantage of being a dragon was that he had gotten many traits. The low light didn't hurt him as he smashed through the priests who were guarding the place. His nose told him the stench of blood. Luckily, it also told him that there were at least 4 fallen angels. He knew of 3 he wanted alive. And Asia. He could smell that she was also still alive. Eventually, he ended up at the place where he saw the remaining priests. Rias had better be grateful to him. He was going to take care of a pest problem for her. The number of priests easily outnumbered the devils 1 to 10. Ah, so our guest of honor is here. White dragon. Issei's eyes zoned onto a fallen with a fedora. The only male that he could smell. And you are? Danashik. I heard of you, all from Rainier. And sweet, cute Asia as well. Issei's eyes narrowed to slits when he looked around for her. Where is she? Oh, don't worry about her. Snapping his fingers, 8 priests brought in 4 bloodied figures. Issei. Asia was the only conscious one. No doubt because of her sacred gear. He was glad that his own gave him a mask. He was about to cry when he witnessed how the cute girl that he grew mighty fond of was looking like this. Hey there, Asia. Sit tight. I'll be there soon. The priests, just like the ones upstairs, began to laugh. And Danashik joined in with the laughing as well. Oh, really? Even a fledgling dragon like you should know what you are horribly outnumbered. There will be no Issei cut him right off as he smashed his fist into the stomach of the fallen angel. Throwing him over his shoulder, Issei aimed his arms at the 8 who were shocked to see him move. Small shots of energy aimed at the priests took them out, while the women were safe. Issei. Tears of relief filled Asia's eyes when Issei turned his back to her. I said I'd come for you. Now close your eyes. I don't want you to see this. Issei announced while he looked back at the priests. Low-level chumps who were about to make their maker, and their unmaker, Albion. Let's roll, partner. Making a barrier to protect the 4, Issei jumped down on the first unlucky few who came rushing to him. Their bones snapped like they were little twines. He couldn't sap any power out of them, but that wasn't needed. He wanted to work out a system. The first to act is the first to win. A fist came from behind and it smashed to one priest as he crashed into a group of 4. Blocking a sword, Issei grabbed him by the throat. A headbutt caused the nose to cave in. The priest didn't have to suffer for long as Issei grabbed the skull and with enough pressure, caused it to crack like a nut. Then he went on to the next one. Avoiding a swipe of the sword, Issei just banged his fist through the next guy. He could feel the blood and guts on his fist. Swiping him away, Issei zoned into the next one. A backhanded fist came smashing through on that one. Then he looked down on the ground and grabbed one guy up. Using him as a ragdoll, Issei used his body to smash him through 5 more. Deciding to use his own sword, Issei just went in his head. Albion, Charlemagne, that would be overkill, partner. But fine, I'll indulge you. A giant claymore appeared from his body and Issei just grabbed it. A fitting gift to send all those heathens to oblivion. He had learned to control its power. Issei smirked when he felt the power surging through. It was nearly the same as having Albions dividing the power of his foes and receiving it. This time, he would dish out the power. Looking around, there were more that came through. Christ, how many rogue priests did these fallen take in their ranks? Issei knew that Azazel wouldn't approve of this. He raced to the first guy and smashed him through. Turning around a circle, Issei's sword came crashing through the next guy. His open fist was just another weapon. When one priest got pierced through, Issei blasted him off. His body became a grenade for the next guy. Taking out 5 more guys in the gibs, Issei smirked. But they just kept on coming. When a couple began to fire shots at him, Issei just felt the bullets hitting his scale mail. He looked up and saw they were hurling from further away. Issei simply raised his fist as he let his own dragon shot pierce through them. The bits of energy were the size of cannonballs. All too easy to cause damage. The next assholes were brought in with close-range fighting again. Turning around, Issei used his right foot to kick the head away. His smirk grew wilder as he began to lose himself in the slaughter. You damned human. I'm going to. Oh, right. That Danashik was still alive. Issei looked to see that he had thrown a light spear at him. Issei simply took the spear and broke it off from his armor. You're going to do what? Issei simply asked. His own fury was nearly out of proportion. The only reason why he remained calm is that he needed to keep the noise down. Asia had to look at him again. I have been on this place for maybe 10 years. But you forget what I am. Issei flew Danashik by the throat. The fallen angel struggled as he wanted to shout. Issei's left arm grabbed from below the throat and simply ripped the body away. The eyes widened as untold amounts of pain raced through the brain. Issei beheaded Danashik by doing the opposite. Sending the body away. Down below, he looked at the remaining priests. With Danashik gone, they were about to piss themselves. You made your choice. Now die with the consequences. Issei simply cut through the rest of them using his high speed. He wanted to make sure that none of them lived through this. His bloodlust was sated when he was done with all of them. Unlike upstairs, this time, he made sure that all of them were dead. Turning back to the women, Issei was relieved that all 4 showed signs of life. First, he cut Asia loose. You can open your eyes now. The blonde nun saw her savior in front of her. Issei felt the arms immediately encircling his torso. I knew you'd come. I just knew it. Issei hugged her back while he was rubbing circles on it. He wished that he could have been there to save her. Sorry I took a while. Letting her go, he looked over her body. There were no wounds and all damage seemed to be mental. How do you feel? Did they hurt you? Asia shook her head while she watched him. They treated me well. Rainer-sama. The words left her mouth and it reminded both that they still had others in this place. Issei cut Middlet and Kalawarner loose while Asia took care of Rainer. From all 3, she was the only one who was conscious. Thanks for the call, Issei said as he helped her up. The fallen beauty looked at him, and when her eyes found Issei, she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed a searing kiss on his. Issei's eyes widened. A very nice reward if he was to say, but Asia's blush, adorable pout, and glare were something that he really wasn't sure if he should be that grateful. When Rainer let him go, she buried her head in his shoulder as she cried her lungs out. It looked like Asia wasn't the only one terrified. Because he had to comfort Rainer, Issei turned to Asia to explain to him what happened. What went wrong? Rainer-sama had taken me in. After I left Rome. She told me it would be fine. But Danashik-sama. He found out that she had a way out. And he didn't want to. Issei sighed as she continued to comfort Rainer. How did you get here, Issei? I left Rome as you did. When I knew you'd come here, I went after you. When Rainer came around, I offered her to get her out. She agreed. It was about the only way I could save you. Asia nodded as she wrapped her arms around the 2 as well. What about those 2? They defended me. Rainer-sama called someone. You, I presume. Issei nodded to her. Yes. Now, this is all very touching. But can you explain this to me, Issei Hayadu? Turning his head, he was greeted by Rias Gremory. The 4 devils were presumably in her peerage. One was a woman that showed the same beauty as Rias. Long black hair and violet eyes, and Issei would be sure she had the biggest pair of fun bags he ever saw on a woman. The other one was Kaneko Tuju. She gave him a simple nod as he returned it. P with yellow eyes and short white hair. The 2 knew each other. The last person was the boy in his class. blonde hair and blue eyes, and Issei could think that he had smelt some holy energy of him. We should talk, yes, but I doubt that this place around with dead is the right place to have this conversation. My place it is. Issei untangled himself from Rainier and jumped down. Handing Rias a card, she was surprised that he could afford to live there. Meet me there and we discuss the rest later. Rias was about to protest, but Issei's eyes showed that he was very adamant about this. And just like her peerage, she hadn't missed the bloodbath that Issei unleashed. So she agreed. Issei turned to the ladies there. You're coming with me. Rainier nodded to him, and Issei expanded his wings. Gently, he took Middlet and Kalwarner up. He didn't waste time flying through the roof. He had better check the upper floor. One body had removed himself from the floor. Scene skip. When he landed in his place, he wasn't surprised to see the devils already in his living room. They had made themselves at home. It was fine by him. You owe us a story. Rias had crossed her arms while she sat on the sofa. Real boss, babe. I'm going to change first. And do you mind if Asia checks on the other two first? They are still unconscious. Issei placed the two fallen in his room. Asia luckily still had her sacred gear. Come with me. He ordered Rainier, who gulped. Don't worry. His gentle tone comforted her. I'll protect you. Asia had luckily started on them. Asia, do you mind joining us when you are done? The blonde nodded at him. She was good to work at them. Will do. Then she gave a wink to Issei. Lady killer? Issei blushed when he heard sweet little Asia say those words. Rainier looked gobsmacked. Asia had more traits to her than she would have guessed, and even more in common with her than she thought. Issei had taken a shirt and some sweatpants. Without a hint of shame, he changed into his room. Rainier gulped when she saw his muscles, and just like the fallen angel, Asia was blushing as well. Turnabout was fair play. With that done, Issei walked down and firmly wrapped a hand around Rainier's waist. She had no escape as Issei came down the stairs of his bedroom. He took a seat on the couch, opposite of Rias, while Rainier stood behind the one he was sitting on. Sorry for the wait. I've been a terrible host. You'd like anything to drink? He asked the devils who had been waiting patiently on him. No, thank you. We've been dying to hear what happened in that church. Rias' tone was much like his. Severe, strict, uncompromising. I know about much as you do. I got a call from Rainier an hour ago, telling her to get my ass to that church. Blasted through, saw them captured. Decided to level the place. Issei simply answered as he sat back. Nodding to Rainier, she began to speak. Red, what did you tell your peerage about the agreement? Forming a tick on her forehead, this fallen angel really had no proper decorum, but Rias understood that there were times and places for everything. Just about all they needed to know. Good, that makes things easier, Rainier announced to the group. As we agreed, I'd call Issei when they'd start the ritual. Danashik found out. He overpowered me and my friends. I gave Issei the call. And the white dragon saved us all. Issei sighed when he heard that line. There you have it, Issei said as he looked at Rias. The devil lady crossed her arms. As per the agreement, I have turned a blind eye to this predicament, and now, you will help me when I need it. Issei knew that part. There remains one last thing. What are you going to do now with these fallen and Asia Argento? Rainier shrugged on that matter. Far as the high-ups are concerned, we are written off. Basically, we would need a neutral and powerful faction to ensure survival. Issei here is our best bet. Crossing her arms, the fallen angel would speak for her turn and would not go out because of decorum. Thank you, Rainier. I believe that would be the best course. I'll do the same with Asia. For now. Issei knew that it wouldn't be for long before the church would track him and Asia down. Despite his immense power, there wasn't enough influence to keep someone with such a powerful, sacred gear as Asia safe, but he could talk about that later. Not after a night like this one. While that appears to be a good course, I do believe that I am overseer of this town. Therefore, I'd like it if we could keep an eye on you. Issei turned to Rainier, who sighed. Well, we are beggars. Therefore, we can't be choosers. What do you have in mind, Red? My name is Rias Gremory. I would appreciate it if you could use that name. A small leakage of power came out of her hair. Issei just raised his arm and showed it to her. Not in my house. I'd like to keep this place intact. The threat of Issei fighting was enough to calm everyone down. Very well then, Rias, Rainier stressed her name. What do you have in mind? Transfer to our school. Your appearance could easily fool others. And as I and Sona rule the school, we can easily transfer you in. Rainier looked back to Issei. Basically, he was her boss now. Issei, I got in the school as well. And if you insist, very well, Rias. We can do as you asked? Although, we'll need to discuss it with your friends. Rainier nodded to him. It shouldn't be an issue. But please make it so that I'm in Issei's class. Rias sighed when she heard that. Well, that should be doable. For now, Issei, I expect you and the Fallen back. Now, about Asia Argento? Rias-senpai, we all had a long night. And speaking of her, Issei's head turned to Asia, who gave a shy wave to the group. Rias just waved back at her with a gentle smile. I think we all need some cool-down time. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's late. And I want to sleep. Do you need anything else? Rias shook her head. Issei really began to find her beautiful. Not that it was a huge shock. Might be his lack of sleep. No. I think we got all we need. Good night, good night. Issei simply said back as they left through a magical circle. Looking back at Rainier, the fallen angel allowed her legs to give out, and she draped over Issei. Asia joined the two. She gave the dragon one strong hug. That was horrifying. Rainier blurted out while Asia gave fervent nods in agreement. Ah, you grow used to that. But are you sure you want this? Yes. Both women shouted, which caused Issei to chuckle. Very well. Now, I don't know about you two, but I need some sleep. Given the fact that my bed is occupied. Asia gave a shy blush. Why don't you take the couch? And I'll be sleeping on the ground? Rainier asked in disbelief. No. I don't want that either. Asia joined the fallen. You seriously want to sleep with me on the couch? Issei asked as he was prepared to act the perfect gentleman. Yes. Both were a hint too eager. But Issei could humor them. Why, they would take him as their body pillow, Asia's head on the right shoulder, while Rainier took the left one as Issei had wrapped his arms around their bodies. There were worse ways to sleep. Issei guessed that last night would be the last time he would ever sleep without women in his bed. Not that Issei complained. Issei woke up with a nice feeling on both his arms. Forcing his eyes open, his brain began to think about what happened last night. On his left slept a woman in some sort of pajamas that were just showing her innocence largely intact. Her long blonde hair was around her body. Asia cutely yawned as morning greeted her. Good morning, Issei. With a grin, Issei's eyes were wandering over her. Morning, Asia. When a second yawn came out, Issei's eyes settled on a very mature body. Long, thick and black wings came out as it had given the two a cocoon to sleep in. Morning, you two. Issei found that he liked her mature appearance better. Her voice was just a bit deeper and womanly. It made her sound so why. Rainier wasn't. The fallen angel had borrowed a t-shirt from Issei, and there were those who claimed a woman should be most why while dressing up. Issei was of the firm believer that there were few things as why as a woman sleeping in an oversized shirt, and with just panties on. Good morning, Rainier. Issei calmly replied. Before he could even finish that sentence, she wrapped her arms around him, and gave Issei a long and loving kiss. The dragon was first tense from it but let the fallen do her thing. Asia's head became as red as a tomato, and her eyes grew to the size of saucers. Especially with the S that came out of her mouth. Issei hoped that wasn't drool coming out of her mouth. When Rainier let go, a small line of saliva connected between them was all that was left. Issei wanted to ask why she had done it but felt two soft fingers on his mouth. Thanks to you, I and my two friends lived to see another day. I take that as something that didn't come through. Hence why I found it a very good way to thank you for being such a knight in shining armor. The two other occupants cringed at that pun. That was horrible, Asia complained. She pecked Issei on his cheek as she thought the same thing. Ray, you do realize that I am pretty much your owner right now? Issei's head began to think about the implications that came through with saving the fallen angels. He better would start taking lessons from others. The fallen angel sat up and looked at Issei. He was a bit younger than she would have guessed but had serious amounts of power and experience, was clearly well-to-do, and had some suave. If I am honest, you aren't the worst to hold my leash. As long you don't sell me out to the devils, I can work on that. Issei looked her over. She would have to do training because just a fallen angel wouldn't suit him. Depends on what you see as selling out. This is their turf. We have to play along but I ain't gonna allow any disrespect. Then again, I have learned that supernatural creatures got a lot in common. Before the women could ask what he meant, they heard the noise upstairs. Heightened senses were a boon to have as Issei saw Kerlongsj and Middlet walking out of the room. Glad to keep his mouth up, he watched as they came down. Kerlongsj looked freaking hot. Long, blue hair that came down to her ass while her S giggled out. He was sure that she had one of the largest sets he had ever laid eyes on. Meanwhile, Middlet had short blonde hair. The most distinct feature was the fact that both women were. Issei turned to Asia, who had a luminescent blush over her face. I had to cut through the clothing. There was nothing left anyway. She cried out, embarrassed. Meanwhile, Rainier sighed as she watched the two. Never expected you to walk around. Rainier grinned as she watched the two. Kerlongsj was the first to look at Issei while Middlet had a glare covering her face. Took the words right out of my mouth, Rainier. Where they are we? Issei shot a small ball of energy her way. It was so fast that Kerlongsj didn't even see it coming. Mind your language around Asia, please. Standing up, the newcomers could see the healthy young man. Both had been lustful creatures, but they could feel a pecking order. Rainier, could you inform the two of what happened last night? I have to get to school. Unlike what the two would have thought, Rainier just nodded to Issei. Wait a minute here. Who are you? Issei raised his left arm and showed his sacred gear. I'm your owner now. The white dragon just said as he passed them by. He needed to get to his bedroom. Oh, I'd appreciate it if you don't leave this house. Take what you need of clothes out of my drawer. As soon we can, we go shopping. Plus, this place has rooms open. Figure out a way where you sleep. That idea caused a smile among the women as Issei took out his uniform. He knew that he would have to do some shopping as well. It wouldn't hurt him. Besides, it might cause him to show off if they could drive. As soon he was outside, he looked up to the sky. Issei wanted to be alone with his thoughts. There was no going back now. But it would be himself how it would go. Nicely done on the new mates, Issei heard his partner talking. He had been quiet. But it was time to talk. Haven't claimed them yet. Not in that term. I was worried that you wouldn't mature. You need to do that. I will figure out a way how to make things work, Albion. I promise you that. It does beat out most of your lays. Comparing a human woman to supernatural ones ain't fair. Issei shot back to his partner. But at least, now, it would have some meaning. While having intercourse was great for a young dragon, in terms of maturity, Issei was growing. Besides that, partner, I have some other news. I have been picking up the smell of another dragon in your school. That would be enough reasons for Issei to be worried when he heard that news. Are you saying that the red one hangs around? No, if that would be the case, the stench would be unbearable. I would have informed you way before. No, it's not as potent. If I were to guess, Vritra is hanging around. I haven't managed to pinpoint the point, but I have a rough fix. Now, if you could available. Rolling his eyes on the remarks of his partner, Issei focused on the more important stuff. I got other things to worry about. Like Rias and her peerage, and speaking of the devil. She came strolling by. Nearly everyone around her was awestruck by her presence. Her green eyes found Issei, who stood back. Issei-kun. Hundreds of dreams crashed and burned, yet Rias paid no mind to them. She ignored the woes of the women and the curses of the men. You need something from me, Gremory-senpai? Issei asked in a casual voice. He was playing it smoothly. Yes, after school, I'd like to see you in the Occult Research Club. We will get your registration in order and get all the rest filled out. Hearing between the lines was something that Issei got good at. So he knew exactly what game she was playing. Very well, I hope to see you there. With a slight bow, he walked to the school. Inside of his head, he was smirking as many saw their beloved princess and idol just burn their hopes for them. He just hoped that Rias had informed Sona about everything that happened in the church. He didn't want to explain that again. School went by very, very slow. He was grateful that he could keep himself busy in his mind. Despite that, he was bored while he kept his mind on the things with Rainier and Asia. He knew that with the deal, there were still details he would need to hark out with Rias. There were plans that he could do with the girls in his house. Rainier and her friends were low-tier chumps. Now, he wouldn't keep them on that. He would train them to the point they could be proud of themselves. Asia was another matter. Issei was ready to gamble quite a bit. Of course, Rias was a devil. She could negotiate and make him do her damned business. Issei wouldn't mind playing her tune as long as she gave him what he wanted. But that shouldn't be an issue. Scene skip. Issei knew where to go at the end of the day. The day had been uneventful. He did get an invite to the Kendo Club. If he were to guess, they wanted to know how he got Rias Gremory to talk to him. Issei knew that there would be more to it, and Issei found her to be a mighty fine lady. She had very nice and a great figure, and her attitude was enjoyable. We should consider her into your harem, partner. I'll let the women come to me. Don't wait too long for them, can it? Issei shot back and he walked into the room. His own senses were good enough, and he walked through the door. When he knocked on the door, he found that fine style was something found back in the clubroom. The furniture looked like it cost more than most people made in a month. Wood was around the place with Victorian-style couches and chairs. One large one was where the only resident was seated. Right behind a desk sat Rias. His eyes went around and saw some bookcases with a lot of them still inside. Thank you for coming, Issei-kun. The smile that he gave had caused women to swoon, but Issei knew better if he wanted to sweep Rias from her feet like that. You're welcome, Rias Gremory. Now, if you could forgive me, I see that your servants are missing? The redhead sighed as she watched him come closer. I take you wanted some privacy for this discussion. I believe that you can behave like a gentleman. Issei stood before her and looked like he was thinking about that. I can. If you behave like a lady? Too many times he had seen women that belonged to lesser quarters demand to be treated like ladies while they themselves had no respect for men or themselves. It had to come from both sides. That shouldn't be an issue. Issei listened to Rias and waited before she talked. I have seen Sona and explained that I'll handle the situation. We will get the fallen angels and Asia Argento in this school. We can have them fill roles as students or teachers. Maybe within a week or so. Issei nodded to her. I hope that Rainier explains it to her friends. It shouldn't be an issue in my regard either. Issei put his hands on her desk. He didn't hang over her, yet. I hope it won't be. Although I will not be looking forward to having fallen angels in my school. Issei counted to 4 before he opened his mouth. Rias, no? Gremory-senpai. I have learned that supernatural species got a lot in common. Give them a chance and I'll ask the same. Make them earn your trust, but do give them your respect. I will demand they do the same. Rias relaxed and nodded to Issei. That is the fallen angels. I take you'll keep them. Issei nodded to her. She had figured him out already. But Asia was something that she had not been able to figure out. I do intend to keep watch over them, yes? I closed my eyes for you going and saving them plus Asia. If you need more favors, you'll have to do things for me. Issei watched her words. I have no problem with that. Gremory-senpai, I will be perfectly candid with you. I hope you respect me enough to do the same. He didn't miss the pink tinging her cheeks while he leaned closer in. I can't protect Asia. Power I have, influence I do not. That is something you want if I look at you. Rias took a few seconds until a masterful glare set in. Do you take that you see myself or my adorable peerage as weak? Issei took a few seconds. When he had drawn out a breath, he looked back at her. I am not saying you are weak. But can you say with certainty that you can defeat me in a fight? Rias opened her mouth and began to think about it. She had seen the slaughter he did in the church. Issei didn't even look winded. Maybe a knight had been thrown in her path. Admitting you can't defeat me isn't a bad thing. Knowing yourself is important as a warrior. I take you need my help. I have no problem offering it. As you said, we can help each other. Rias' eyes went right at him. He really could help her with the problem she was facing. But yet, she found that there was more coming in. Help from him wouldn't be cheap. You have a point. Get to the main one, Issei-kun. I want you to reincarnate Asia into your peerage. Well, it wouldn't get more to the point than that. Any particular reason why you want that? Issei waited before he answered. I don't want the church to get Asia back. Franz and the guy up there do what they can, but it's not enough. Asia is out of the church. I don't want her back in that place. But if they come around, they can take her from my arms. They are not as happy to do that with you, heiress of the Gremory clan. Little sister of Surzek's Lucifer. Rias understood that part. Issei was also right. Do you believe Asia would be willing to become a devil? After a life like she had. Issei reeled back and scratched his cheek. I'll tell her the score. She is more mature than we both give her credit for. Plus, she is a very kind girl. It should take some time, but it shouldn't be too hard. Rias could see that Issei knew Asia very well. Plus, having the wielder of Twilight Healing. That would be a worthwhile addition. But she would be asking for more, I can see that. But you can imagine that I'd be using an evil piece. Just for you. That is a steep price, Issei. Issei smirked as he heard her tone. I understand. I am willing to pay that price. But do you think I'll be good for helping you on that? That smile of hers was really seductive. Oh, I can imagine. As you said yourself, I have influence. You have power. We both need each other. Although it should be further in the future. For now, I think it's best that you settle your guests into this town and this school. I'll call on you when that is needed. Issei nodded to Rias. I agree. This agreement is very agreeable. Holding out his hand, Rias understood. The handshake was good. Not too hard, not too soft. He let her go after a shake. I'll keep you on your agreement, Rias said as she pointed a finger at him. Issei smirked. Don't worry. I'll do the same. And with that, Issei knew that he had to see his new roommates. Can I leave now? Issei asked. Yes, I'll see you tomorrow. When he walked out the door, Rias felt her heart fluttering. It was weird to see a guy around here who didn't go giddy. He respected her and yet found that her appeal wasn't lost on him. If she could be honest, she felt the same when he smiled. It wasn't like she saw most men. But something told her that it would be a fight to get into his bed. But she was more than willing to go along. Of course, it would take a while before she would take a shot with him. He had talked the talk. Could Issei hire to walk the walk? Scene skip. Why did you not take the shot? Issei lamented the fact that Albion was watching over him. Albion, ever heard of restraint? I did. That is not an excuse to go against your natural urges. Talking about me or yourself. Rias is a hot lady, but I want to wait before that. I still don't see how she is different from the fallen you have claimed, low-tier chumps, that I gotta whip into shape, or the little sister of Surzek's Lucifer? That is a world of difference. Sides, I would get into shit that I am not ready for. Issei knew that he didn't hold a candle to Michael. If that was the case, he didn't have a snowball's chance in hell against Surzek's Lucifer. Yes, even for the White Saint, he knew of the reputation of Surzek's. From what Issei heard, there was quite a bit of admiration for the super devil. The way Surzek's handled diplomacy was extraordinary, but Issei was also aware what sort of a siscon Surzek's was. He would think twice before baiting her. When the white dragon got home, he opened the door and felt a blast coming to his face. Wow, I'm really feeling the love. The sarcasm could be used to dry the Atlantic Ocean. In front of him stood Middlet, who was seething like a kitten. It made her look adorable if Issei were to guess. She would be more adorable if she didn't try to squash his face. What does Rainier mean? We are now your slaves. Do you intend to use us to satisfy your every need? Are we your slaves? Do you intend to defile us? Issei was very happy that Asia didn't hear those bits. With a look, he grabbed Middlet's fist and removed it from his face. Wow, talk about being perverted. For your questions, I don't intend to use you ladies for that. Not if you don't want that. Rainier stood in the doorframe with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Issei. When I told the little girl about it, she went into rage mode. She looked at the small bruise that the fallen angel gave him. I can forgive you if you kiss it. Middlet had her mouth on the floor as Rainier just sauntered over to Issei. The raven-haired kissed the bruise and after that, his mouth. She felt safe, something she hadn't felt in centuries. How did the other woman take it? Issei asked as Rainier let him go. Kalwarner saw you just leaving. In her own words, well, if we are anyone's slaves then rather a hot, young, virile guy than an old disgusting pervert. So I think you're good. Issei knew these women were more than simple lays that he had so many of. Those fallen angels would be women Issei would invest in. It was also for their sakes. That is good to hear. Already claiming the hearts of fair maidens? You never change, Issei. Asia pouted as Rainier just barked a laugh. Issei didn't have a real way to react to that line. Asia-chan, we are anything but fair maidens. We are fallen. I think you need to keep that in mind. Asia didn't let the pout go, but Issei just walked up to her. He ruffled her hair and kissed her on the nose. Her great green eyes became wide as saucers while Middlet just glowered at him. Jealous? You don't have to be. Asia grew up right next to Issei. She had learned from Albion that dragons rarely went monogamous. It didn't mean she had to like it. When Albion informed her of the intense drive, having multiple wives would be a blessing in disguise. Stop being a pervert, you. And you, I can't believe you agree with him. Rainier just smirked and walked up to the male in the house. I take that he swept me off my feet and claimed me. I see no issue with this. Rainier just informed Middlet, and she watched over at Asia. The raven-haired wanted Issei, and sharing was more fun in her opinion. Of course you don't. Issei stood back and let Rainier glide off his back. He didn't want to deal with this crap. We are not having this discussion right now. I am of the belief that you need to court ladies. And despite past experiences, you are ladies. The three women in the room blushed up a storm when they heard that. His sharp senses told him that there was food being processed. Is someone cooking? I smell meat. Well, you are in for a treat. The sensual voice would have caused lesser men to just from that. Issei looked up and he felt a need to pin down a woman and her brains out. That Kalwarner had the most mature beauty he had seen in a while, and she was wearing nothing but an apron. I take that you like this. Turning his head around, Issei was not prepared to see a woman. Oh, it wasn't because he had not seen several women in various states of undress. No, it was because of the power of the apron. You can say that. But when we eat, can you wear something else? Turning around, Kalwarner flashed her ass to the dragon. Oh, is someone feeling a little bit aroused because he saw me in an apron? Issei, you're a perv. Feeling that they had made fun of him long enough, Issei decided that he had to wear the pants in this house. Oh, Kerlongsj felt a hand smacking her bountiful behind with varying reactions from the girls. Asia was blushing, Middle looked aghast, and Rainier didn't look surprised. Issei was not a guy who would take shit, so she didn't say much else. For Pete's sake. Get your mind out of the gutter. Walking up to the living room. There are some announcements that I would like to make. It concerns all of us. His tone was serious, but I'm going to take a quick shower first. The heat is sticking to my skin. Taking off his shirt, he found that his appearance did the same to the women as he had hoped. He was why, and he knew it. The cold water did wonders for his skin as Issei did his best to get his thoughts in a row. Rias was reasonable. He wondered what she needed him for. She would need power. And well, he didn't mind helping her out. With the fallen, he could help them as well. It was clear how they thought about him, at least two did. He could figure things out with them. There was no denying that Rainier and Kerlongsj were why. You would have to be blind to deny that, and he had bedded one already. But he would pull out the stops for all of them to get them to share his bed. That was just his personal policy. On the table, an oven plate had been set. Inside, he could smell meat, eggs, cream, and spices. It only hit him then how hungry he was. Kerlongsj walked right in behind him, and she heard his stomach grumble. I hope you're hungry. 'Cause I made enough for 7 people. Before long, they were seated around the table, and after sharing his food, Issei let the warmth fill his stomach. It was delicious, that much he could say. This is incredible, he said between bites. The blue-haired bombshell smirked. Men were simple creatures. Keep his stomach full and his balls empty, and a guy would move heaven and earth for a lady. Thank you for the compliment. But I can't take all the credit. Asia and Rainier helped me. Issei winked at the 2 women who swooned over it. Now, it struck Issei that his place was relatively intact. Turning his head to Rainier, he wanted to say something, but she had already read his mind. The 3 of us stopped Middle from doing anything stupid. I take you want your place to stay livable. Remind me to thank you 3 properly for that. I will need no reminder for thanking you, Kerlongsj-san, for the excellent meal. When all were satisfied, Issei waited until the table was clean before he opened his mouth. Rainier, Asia. What did you tell Kerlongsj-san and Middle about the situation we have found ourselves in? Kerlongsj spoke, and her voice left little for Middle to say. We were told you saved our lives. You would make a deal with the devils to save our skins. And we are now pretty much your property. Issei nodded to her, didn't miss a single thing. For this little part, I see what I have in front of me. You are low-level chumps. The entire way to get noticed was to become stronger. Seen that over 1,000,000 times. You want power. Issei's voice was harsh. They just waited because they knew what he said was right. I have no problem with you being my property, but I am of the belief that you have to be equals in this. I'll get you there. It won't be the easy route, it won't be the fun route, but value gained is 100 times better than value claimed. Rainier had an idea what Issei meant with that. You mean the eat dirt and train hard route? Correct. But I will not start working yourselves in the ground immediately. We'll need a proper way for that. As for you, Asia, I am afraid that you are in a different predicament. The former holy maiden let her breath go. You can't own me like them, can you? I am afraid not. But because I don't want to lose, the only way is that you are owned by someone else. You haven't forgotten about Rias Gremory? Asia shook her head. In her mind, she knew what she was in for. Her entire life she was owned by the church and only had to accept the love of God. As every nun knew, God was lousy in the intimacy department. It was only due to Issei she received a mediocre amount of fun, so when she was discarded, her faith in Issei kept her going. She trusted him with all her heart. You want to hand me over to Rias Gremory as one of her servants? Handing over is such a big word. Gremory-senpai needs power, something I have in abundance. And I need influence, something that she has. A partnership with mutual benefits. If she were to reincarnate you as a devil, Issei had a silver tongue. It helped him out in many cases, so you can claim her as one of your women. Middle glowered as she eyed the young man. I do not have that relationship with Gremory-senpai. And if that comes, it'll be on our own accord. Speaking of which, the devils and I want to keep an eye on you. Hence why you'll be coming to Kuoh Academy as students in the next week. In the mind of Kerlongsj, Asia, and Rainier, it meant they could be around Issei all the time. The fact that devils kept them under scrutiny would be a small afterthought. Middle felt that was a major problem. What? You want us to be around those lowly humans and pretend we are like them? Issei's glare made her eat and sit down. Now, that is settled. Asia, his attention turned to the blonde. Take your time on that matter. There is no pressure on it for now. Just keep in mind that when the church knocks on the door, I am not sure if I can protect you. Issei hated the idea that he would have to use his powers against Zenobia or Irina. But when it came to the ones under his protection, he would not hesitate. Okay, Issei, now that is settled. Tomorrow, don't worry about food. We'll go shopping after school. I take you are all in need of some more clothes. The idea of a shopping trip sent all four buzzing in a frenzy. Issei knew it was the perfect time to slip out and get to his room. Homework wouldn't do itself and he got plenty of it. Maybe that was one thing that he wouldn't like about his new life. But it was what it was. Luckily, it wasn't that hard to do it. His previous life as a mercenary gave him a lot of brains to work things out. He did his job and he did his best job on it. Well, we wondered where you were. A voice came around when his head turned to see Kerlongsj. I have to do schoolwork. Something you'll have to do as well. Walking over to him, the fallen draped herself over him. He could smell the fact she had also taken a shower. I dread over that. Her s were spilling out of her towel and Issei wasn't sure if he could handle this. But he did hold himself back. For now, turning around, he saw how Kerlongsj stood before him. I think that you still owe me thanks for the cooking I did for you. I like my rewards up front. Issei didn't hold back when she said that. Grabbing her shoulders, he pulled her close. Before she could say anything else, Issei forced his tongue down her throat. Kerlongsj edged when she felt that. A blush settled on her face as she felt it. Kerlongsj felt the attention. Issei wasn't taking it easy, but there was a serious amount of delicacy and warmth in it. He was intense but gentle as she felt the kiss. She relaxed in his touch as her body went over him. Is that enough of thanks? Dropping her towel, Issei could watch over her perfect body. He could feel his straining against his pants, and the visual appeal did not help. No. I want more. Issei wanted to collect his thoughts. For now, he hadn't been promised to anyone. And well, Asia knew, or at least, should know, what sort of a guy he was. You're not worried about anything else? Rainier told me that you blew her brains out. It's rare to see her that peppy. Asia-chan doesn't want to and Middle wouldn't want this now. Plus, they are in their rooms as you asked? So right now, I want to use silly. Kerlongsj said as she slid down in front of him. Before she could unzip his pants, Issei stopped her. Is this a pity, a thank you, or are you genuinely attracted to me? Despite the fact that he was as horny as her, supernatural puberty, he wanted to know what this meant. A mix of the latter two and the fact that I am yours. Middle might not like it, but I do want you. Also, it's been too long since I got laid. Issei sighed and touched the desk. I can soundproof a room. We can be as loud as we both want to be. Issei said as Kerlongsj smirked. From all guys that would ever hold her leash, Issei could be the best one. Unzipping his pants, his little dragon appeared. Holy. Yeah, you can thank my dragon for that, Issei said as she watched the. It wasn't even fully hard, but she could see how much wanted him to jam that in. Alright. Let's do this. She stroked his, warming him up as Issei let her take charge. He had no problem with it. A fallen angel with eons of experience, and a clear sign that she was in control. Well, he didn't mind letting her have this. When Issei began to grow, she could see that he was aroused, but he didn't get any closer to release. So you want me to use my mouth? His hands went right at her large S as he played with them. Use these. Issei's voice left little in the room for argument. Very well. Wrapping her S around her, Issei grunted. This woman could bury his entire inside her warmth, and still, his head would come out. Issei grunted as he felt the S envelop them as he grunted. Not that easy to move, Kerlongsj said as she smiled at Issei. In my drawer. Top shelf. Opening it out, she raised an eyebrow when she was on lotion. You come well prepared. She commented as she popped it open. The liquid was spread over their position. The lotion made moving a lot easier as she continued to it over. I do have to ask. Were you hoping for this or? I have a drive that I can't control. Normally it ain't a problem, but well, you know. Issei didn't want to say more. His body had needs, and while he wasn't a stranger to, he did have a moral code. In that case, we will have to do something about that. Kerlongsj teased as she switched between her S and moved up-down. Issei found that a lovely idea as Kerlongsj clearly showed off her experience. Issei gritted his teeth as she increased the pressure on her S while she used her mouth to his head. Instead of making him her S, she just delivered assault to them while she took care of him. Kala, just hold on a bit more. She could feel his S heat, and it was lightening her fire. She was sensitive on those, and the fallen knew that he was close. With a grunt of her name, he unloaded in her mouth. It was too much, and it spilled out of her mouth and over her s. Catching their breaths, she looked him over. You're not even limp, Kerlongsj commented. So compared to Rainier, how was I? Issei rolled his eyes. You are bigger and softer, but she has better technique. Kerlongsj knew that she asked, and she couldn't complain. Now, do you need any warm-up or? His nose told him all he needed to know. Clearly not. Kerlongsj stood up and walked over to his bed. Turning around, she laid back and had her legs open. Like this? Please. Issei wanted to show what he could do, but if she was begging for him, he wouldn't let her be disappointed. Taking off his shirt, she could see his body. Issei was right on the cusp of being a man while still having a boy's face. Kerlongsj did like the image of Issei. You are a very handsome young man. Issei smiled as he kissed her. You're also quite beautiful. The smile on her face gave him enough encouragement. Kerlongsj touched his and slowly went down on her as she inserted it in her. This feels so good. Her walls expanded as she welcomed him in her folds. Grabbing Kerlongsj by her hips, Issei looked over her body. Her long, white legs wrapped themselves around his waist. Issei grunted as well as he pierced her fully. His touched places that were untouched. His head just teased her womb as he entered her. Yet, he didn't move as he was fully buried in her. When I can move, just say so. Kerlongsj experienced the same thing with his kiss. Intense but gentle, she waited a bit and just enjoyed his feeling. Issei didn't stay still though. Her s were on, his hands played with her thighs and his eyes shined at her. When Kerlongsj caught her breath, she nodded to him. Do it. Not needing to be told twice, Issei rocked his hips. While he did use enough force, he was still gentle and watched her reactions. Kerlongsj's mouth had begun to drool as Issei figured out where her sweet spot was. Her s got a pitch higher. Issei wanted to hear her shout his name. Issei, Issei, Issei. It was the sweetest melody that he heard, and that was driving him mad. So he continued to her silly while Kerlongsj enjoyed herself. His hands left her hips as his mouth attached itself to hers. She could feel how he wanted to drive her silly while she laid back and ed. You're so tight. She smiled back at him. Been a while since I had action. Issei wondered how a hot piece like hers would be hitting dry spells, but he kept those comments wisely to himself. His hips were restless as he ed Kerlongsj. She did move back, and when he pulled out, she let her hips go out. It didn't take long before they found a comfortable rhythm. Issei enjoyed his time with her as Kerlongsj felt the same thing as Rainier did. Her friend didn't lie. Issei was good, and they had been going for a while. It looked like the first shot was just a warm-up as he was holding his own. Kerlongsj could feel a comfortable warmth spreading around her body. It was getting to the point, and she felt the same thing as Issei. Issei, please. Finish this. With a kiss and a gentle rub on her clit, Kerlongsj came undone, and when she got so tight, Issei unloaded in her. He collapsed on top of her. That was fun, Issei said as he rolled out of her. That it was indeed. Laying on his shoulder, she pecked on his cheek. You are incredible. The Y lady didn't make the slightest intention to move. Scene skip. When Issei felt the morning hitting him, a relieved feeling hit him. It was time to get up and get to school. Turning his head, he saw that Kerlongsj was still asleep. So he let her sleep as he made his way to the bathroom. Washing his face and body was the first thing he would need to do. The smell of Kerlongsj clung to him. His life had caused him to bite off the feelings of a tired body. His door went open and he walked right into his bathroom. The bad thing was that it was occupied. The good thing was it was Rainier who was inside, just like the man of the house she was. And Rainier didn't mind at all. Good morning, Issei. To you as well, Rainier. Issei took a washing cloth as he whipped himself over that. Slept well? He asked as he continued to dry him off. I share a room with Kerlongsj, although I know that she was with you. I don't blame her. You don't? Issei knew how women could be. We are supernatural. Monogamy wasn't on the table. Besides, we are your slaves. It's not our place to speak up. He was glad that she knew the position she was in. Issei would never hold it over her head, but it did make things easier. Then Rainier turned serious. We should find a bed to sleep in as well. Middlet and Asia-chan both have taken up that as well. Shouldn't be an issue. Ray, I think that Gremory-senpai would require me to make things for you. I'll call the house when I'm done. You know how to handle a phone? Rainier got a tick on her head as she heard that comment. I'm not an idiot. I can handle that just fine. Just don't make it too late. Issei nodded to her, kissing her on the. Rainier's eyes widened as she felt his tongue slipping into her mouth. Please forgive me for that matter. I had to make sure. I am not in a position to hate you. With that said, Issei could smell French toast. Going back to his room, he changed into his uniform. When he walked into the kitchen, he saw that Asia was cooking. Middle was glaring daggers at him. Ignoring her, he turned to Asia. Good morning, Asia. The former nun smiled at him. Good morning, Issei. I hope you don't mind that I cooked. It was already late. You're a saving angel. Then he realized what he said. Rainier muffled a laugh while Middle still kept her furious look. I missed your cooking though, Asia. The lady smiled as she looked at the rooms. Doesn't Kerlongsj come out? I cooked for her as well. Rainier, who was seated next to her, whispered something in her ear. Instead of a blush, Asia just had a sly look. Oh great, corruption had already set in. Issei, you're a perv. She stuck out her tongue and Issei just ate the toast. It was delicious and he continued to eat. Pretty girls could always lighten up a day. When he got ready to leave, his head turned to the three inside. I'll give you a ring when we can go shopping. Make a list of all what you want, and we'll see how to get all things. I hope that I can get you out of this. Issei, not to complain but I'd like some fresh air, Rainier asked as she had been in the house for nearly 2 days. You can't leave my house. Issei shot back. But when you lay on the roof, they can't complain. So do that. Issei then left the house. Asia took Rainier's hand. Come on. Let's get to the roof. Rolling her eyes, Rainier followed Asia. It would be the only living soul that could be talked to. Middle would stew for at least 2 weeks before she would let this grudge go. Oh, she knew how her shorter companion was. Middle wasn't stupid, so that was why Issei laughed her off. Kerlongsj would still be asleep. Hey Rainier-sama. How can I get Issei's attention? Oh, this girl. She had already begun without her help. Rainier knew that she couldn't go too far, but turning Asia into a teasing minx would be fun. Let's see how we can do that. My stupid master might need that. Scene skip. Issei wondered why he decided to do this. School life wasn't all it was made out to be. But he kept his mind up as he took notes. The less he attracted attention, the better. Although he knew that it was impossible as he had talked to Rias Gremory. The teachers left him be for the most part, and Issei could write it down. His hopes for hoping that people would forget his name died during a break. Is Issei Hayadakun around? Turning his head around, his eyes landed on Akino Himejima. Most of the classmates were fawning over the figure that was worthy of worship. Meanwhile, Issei just turned to the raven-haired beauty. He wondered why she and Rainier were so alike. Akino looked like a mix between the two personas that Rainier had created. Besides that, their hair, eyes, faces, and most notably chests, appeared to be alike. I'm here. You need something from me, Himejima-senpai? Yes, I'm here to inform you that Rias wants to see you at the clubroom when class is over. Issei did something that most could only hope of dreaming, blowing Akino Himejima off. You didn't have to come and tell me. I know that I had to come in. The Nadeshiko's smile twitched a bit. I am also to inform you that we are all going to be present. So don't cause a ruckus. Issei simply pointed his thumb to the class. Like you are doing now? The woman looked behind her and saw how the class was reacting to her. That is different. Don't forget. Issei smiled back at her. Will do. Thank you for reminding me. Issei didn't care about the grudges or hate he received. He was long used to that. Scene skip. When Issei walked through the door, he came to find that the entire peerage was gathered there. On the couch sat both the rook and the knight. Kaneko Tuju just nodded at him, while Kiba Yudo smiled at him. It looks like our latest member would join in now. Guess so. His head turned to Akino, who was brewing tea. His ears did tell him that a shower was running. Why do I hear water rushing? Bucho likes to shower before our meetings, Akino said and giggled. Issei didn't react as any had thought. He just sat down next to Kaneko. Looking up at a plate of cookies at the table, he pointed at them. You going to share those? Kaneko bit through one. She looked back at him, and it was a mixture of a neutral look and a glare. Issei just returned that glare. Yes or no? Just one. Thank you, Issei said as he took one. They weren't bad, but Issei liked ginger snaps more. He ate them when he worked together with a few exorcists who came from the Netherlands. So when does Gremory-senpai comes out? I don't have all day, Issei said. The three devils glared at him as they looked back at him. You'll wait until Bucho is done showering, Kiba replied, and the dragon rolled his eyes at him. I'm not her servant, and my time is not hers to waste. So please, I'm sorry, Issei, but things got a bit hectic. Give me 10 minutes. Issei sat back as he waited patiently until Rias would come out. She looked as pristine as ever. Sitting down in the chair, she leaned on the desk. Her smile caused him to forgive her a bit. So I take you want something from me? Issei asked as she looked at Rias. Yes. Issei, I do require something from you. I will come to a point where I will need your power to borrow. I will inform you what that is when the time comes. For now, I'd like it if you could help us train. Issei scratched his cheek. He wasn't that good of a teacher. Well, if you need me to train you, I'd take a bit more time. Let me see if I miss anything on you four. His eyes went over them. He could smell what they repressed, but it wasn't his place to judge. He would work with what they gave him. Tuja-san, I take as rook, you rely on heavy hits? The little girl just nodded. Kiba-san, you take swords as your main weapon? The knight had an embarrassed laugh. Indeed, his head turned to Rias and Akino. You both strike me as magician users. Himejima-senpai, you use different sort of magic. The smile came back on her face and her eyes closed. Issei-kun can certainly read me well. You got 3, right? Issei looked over at Rias. I am going to be saying this and you use the power you inherited from your mother. It is the same as your older sibling uses. The power of destruction. Rias nodded at him. Yes, very well. Gremory-senpai, Himejima-senpai. Magical attacks require more than just the terrain behind. We have to find a place and time for that. I'll leave you up for that. I have to ask this though. What about my residents? Are they free to leave? Rias sighed as she heard Issei talk. It shouldn't be an issue to get them to get out of the house as long you can track them back. In the course of this week, we are going to prepare and give you the uniforms and files. We placed Rainier and Argento in your call. You will have to look over them. Middlet is in Kaniko's class while Calawarner is a teacher, Issei understood. He doubted that aside from Middlet, any of the girls would have issues with that. That is understandable. For some training, I can help your knight and rook for now. Rias nodded to him. Very well. Outside we can train. Scene skip. Issei found that having an entire forest was a bit extravagant, but at least, it meant that he didn't have to look around too far for a place to train Rias and Akino. He did ask to take it easy for now as it was just testing out his 2 new sparring partners. Kaniko went first, and Issei had to admit it. This little lady packed a far heavier punch compared to Middlet, courtesy of her rook piece, Issei assumed. He did admit. She had serious potential. She was mixing her attacks up from different angles. Issei hadn't moved once from his spot. To add insult to injury, he didn't take out his gauntlet as he matched her blow for blow. When 2 fists didn't connect, Kaniko jumped up and tried a high kick. Issei just raised his arm. The heel of her shoe was buried right into his forearm. It didn't even crack when she felt the pain in her own system. Issei then just took her feet and was about to slam her body down in the ground. Then he remembered he had to be nice. And to train them. Without a healer on standby, he couldn't just maim Kaniko, so Issei just turned her around and his hands were under her armpits. Due to their height difference, her feet dangled 15 centimeters above the ground. Down, Kaniko said one single word. I don't hear please. Issei shot back as the 3 devils looked at him. Down please. With a big smile, he put her down. All right. You want to hear my 5 cents on you? Kaniko nodded. You can mix up attacks and you certainly know how to handle yourself in a scrap. Problem is that you don't know how to handle an opponent who is physically stronger than you. Issei, I do not allow. Issei raised his hand and Rias knew what it meant. If you would notice, I did not bring out my sacred gear or any other weapon I own. I did this with my raw strength. Kneeling to Kaniko, Issei took a kinder approach. If you can't get your foe down in CQC, use your environment. Throw a tree at me, get the earth to rumble. You got it? The tiniest of smiles appeared on her face. Got it. Anything else, Chief? Chief. He could come to like that name. Besides strength, you don't have much else. While I am not going to ask what else you have, I will tell you that you lack speed. You don't have to be a knight, but as a fighter, speed can be a boon. We'll come up with something. He was about to ruffle her hair but then kept back. That would be too close. That is enough for now. We'll have plenty of time to train. Holding out a small fist, Issei understood. He bumped it and Kaniko went to join Rias and Akino. Yudo came back with 2 wooden swords. I take you don't have a sword, but please understand that we can best fight like this. Issei grinned as he took it up. Oh, I do. But I don't want to pull out all at once. Oh, is that advice? Yes. Never pull out all the stops at once. A date is to be simple, Issei said as Kiba raced at him. The dragon had seen it all before. Kiba and Kaniko were too close-minded about using their powers. The extensive speed of the knight was made worthless as Issei easily could keep up with his attacks. It was like he knew what Kiba would do before he even got close. Issei just held his own as he didn't even fight back. He just replied to Kiba's swipes and strokes. After 15 minutes, Kiba looked like he was about to throw up while Issei stood before him. How do you do that? Stamina. That is something you lack. And that is not all. With a gentle tap, Kiba fell on the ground. Standing above him, Issei jammed the sword right into the ground. Issei knelt to Kiba and he would give his advice. Your technique is good, and while I can imagine that strays can fall to you, fighting a sentient being doesn't have that. I'd say you use another method. I can see your type. You use your honor and fairness. Which in actuality is great for the show but S for anything else. In a real fight, I wouldn't have even amused this. I'd just take your throat and slam you into the dirt. Issei continued on it, ignoring Yuto's horrified look. Tell me. Why swords? I can make them appear from my imagination. My sacred gear is sword birth. Issei would ask later how that would go. But he could imagine. Well, I'd say that like Tuji you need some ranged attacks. We can figure that out later. For now, I got some people waiting for me at home. Gremory-senpai. Can I leave? Rias was shocked at how he handled that. At least, he remained polite. Yes, you're free to leave. She could swear that she saw the lightest form of sadistic look appear on his face. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, it'll be your turn, Issei replied, and he just walked out. Nay, Rias. The Crimson Heiress turned to Akino. Yes. Do you think he'll be as rough on us as on our juniors? Kaneko and Kiba sighed. Their older sisters were acting strange. Issei had called. He got the voicemail, so he just went easy. I'm coming home. I'll take a shower first. Scene skip. I'm home, Issei said as he walked through the door. Welcome home, Issei-sama. Kalwarner sat at the table, reading a good book while his eyes wandered around. Where is everyone? Are they out already? Issei asked as he threw his bag on the chairs. No. Middlet is stewing in her room while Rainier and Asia-chan must have fallen asleep on the roof. It has been a quiet day. Ah well. Didn't you hear the phone? Kalwarner shrugged on that. I must have fallen asleep. There is not much else to do. Issei vowed that he would buy a game system and a TV screen. We should do something about that. Either way, I am going to shower and change into my other clothes. Shopping is in order. The smile on her face was revealing her intention. Oh, can I join you? Grabbing the blue-haired minx by her neck, Issei pressed a kiss on her. If we were just us, fine, but I do intend to make it quick. You'll get that shower later, Issei replied to her. Kalwarner sighed as she understood his reasons. Get Rainier and Asia up, please. In 10 minutes, we are leaving. Grabbing a mix of his clothes, he went right to his shower. There was some sweat that he built up from his training, plus he could use it. The water did wonders for him as he felt the water running down his body. In his head, he was thinking of a song. He was living a crazy life. When he got out of the shower, a white shirt with a blue jacket and jeans were his means. He really had to buy other clothes as well. When he got out of the shower, he raised an eyebrow at the attire. Yuma wore the same as on his date. The purple dress. The only normal attire. Meanwhile, Asia had taken her old nun habit out while Middlet had taken her Lolita clothes and Kalwarner her maroon jacket. We can't exactly wear your clothes while we go shopping, Rainier answered his question. Issei sighed as he understood that part. All right. Let's go. He would have taken the car, but there were too many people to get in. Issei ignored the stars from the guys that he got. It was some serious practice as they walked through the shopping streets. Issei thanked every deity and Mao that Kuoh had clothing stores. About this. I'll give you ladies 30 minutes to pick out your wardrobe. I'll pay for it. I don't mind you buying new stuff, but keep it reasonable. I don't need to blow through all my savings at once. He let Rainier take care of Asia as the nun wouldn't have seen them. Maybe some casual ones. Rainier would pick up some jackets and her shirts were also due on something. Meanwhile, Kalwarner found some red shirts and tight jeans. She did have to figure out where she was going to buy customized bras. She would need them. Maybe around the internet. Issei could help her out. A few shirts that were open gave her nice ideas. Middlet was also going around. This town didn't have any of the clothes that she wanted. They would have to go shopping somewhere else, and something told her that she wouldn't be able to do that. Issei picked up a few vests plus a couple of jeans that he needed. Some shirts he would need as well. He let the ladies have their fun. Despite how different they were, women would always love shopping, and it was clear how much they appreciated this. Issei just watched how they interacted. His head turned to see Kalwarner also advised Asia. The head of the nun turned red when she got advice on her choice of underwear. Issei also noticed how the three were picking their underwear. The choice of Kalwarner and Rainier caused Asia to go even redder to the point that she joined Issei. Rainier lifted the garter she would wear. Oh, that would a nice image of her fantastic body. The dragon found they had some great choices. Fashion sense was a great set-in. Before long, Asia joined her best friend. Issei just had his arms crossed as he looked over her. She walked over to him while she couldn't look at him. Something wrong, Asia? The blonde looked at him and shook her head. I don't want to turn into them. Not yet. Patting her on the head, Issei smirked. I don't think you will. They shared a smile as Asia relaxed. Issei, about me, reincarnating into a devil? I know your hand is forced, but Issei breathed out as he watched over Asia. The Gremory clan are known for taking care of their servants. And besides, you think I'll let you just walk away? You will never walk alone, Asia. You can always reach me. I promise you that you'll never ever walk alone. I'll be with you. The girl smiled at him. That Rias lady? She is the one who we met after the church? Issei nodded to Asia. I'll need some time. You have all the time in the world until you don't. When the church comes knocking, it'll be a split decision. Better make it before it comes crashing down. Issei was blunt and honest. He knew the score. Asia nodded at him and smiled. Thanks, Issei. Pulling her in a sideways hug, they relaxed. It was a nice moment for the two. Unfortunately, it couldn't continue. Issei, we are done. Are we interrupting? Turning to the three fallen, Issei watched over the clothes they had picked. No, you're not. Come on. We still have beds to buy. In actuality, Issei was happy they lived with him. The house could be called more of a home now. If he didn't have to support four ladies, Issei would have picked another place instead of an IKEA store, but it had everything they needed. Issei knew of beds that lasted decades and the cupboards could be modeled in. He would have to save cash if he wanted to support them. Maybe when he was done with repaying the favor to Rias, he could ask for money from them. He had to make a living somehow. Luckily, this one had home delivery, so he didn't have to drive. While his Ford was good, he couldn't take all the furniture in the car. Issei would leave the ladies to model their rooms during the week. Scene skip. Despite the insanity of the first few days, Issei had settled into a comfortable rhythm. As he had assumed, the ladies would share his bed, although they kept it at just 2 at the time. Rainier and Kerlongsj liked to share, and it wasn't a bad feeling of having large S squashing your chest. Asia would take modesty as her approach, and she used him as a big teddy bear. Of course, they were the only ones. Middle still snarked at him when he walked into the room. He didn't care. At the school, Issei was getting the files in order. Sona Citri had also invited him to the student council. Besides herself, Tsubaki Shinra, there was another lady, Sarakawa Genshiro. Issei noticed she was a pawn. Sandy blonde hair with a very nice D-cup and a nicely filled-out body if Issei were to guess. Besides that, he could smell that Sarakawa was also a dragon. Albion told him that Vito was somewhere around this place. Most likely, that must be Sarakawa's sacred gear. It was rare to find a female user. At least, that would prevent Issei from going overboard on her, but he would use the same tactics as with every other lady. During the evenings, he trained with both Kiba and Kaneko. They took his advice to heart, and found new ways to fight. Issei wished that he took a picture of the group when he pulled Charlemagne out of his sacred gear. He had also started on small things for Rias and Aquino, and how to train them. For now, they were small bits of magic, as both had shown him what they could do. It would only be during the weekend that they would be trained. The school could use a barrier, and the student council could also be present. During the first weekend that Issei had open, he had to drive around the city to get all forms delivered, plus he had to pick up the clothes from the school. His Ford finally saw some work out, and Issei appreciated the car, and the fact that Kuoh didn't follow the usual guidelines on cars compared to most cities in Japan, as cars still had a place to drive around. When he was driving to the school, he passed by a figure that was walking. Hello there, Himejima-senpai. Aquino's lovely head turned to see Issei in his car. She raised an eyebrow. Era. Issei-kun, good morning. She looked over the muscle car. It was a thing of beauty. Even she could see that. So what are you up to? Well, as you requested, I am going to the school for our training. Issei didn't ask why she wouldn't just teleport there, but had a better idea. Throwing open the door, he motioned to the beauty to get in. Want a lift? The lady had the most gentle smile on her face. Why, thank you. She jumped in and Issei drove off. Aquino felt her heart race. She had rarely been in a car, and it seemed that Issei was a very capable driver. Maybe him being around wouldn't be such a bad thing. Their junior appeared to be full of surprises, and more were sure to come. Issei stood in the middle of the training grounds. He had promised to train both Aquino and Rias in magic. Something that he had learned about greatly throughout the years. Well, I can't really say that I'm disappointed. In the middle of the ground, both women were coming to their senses. Ria's sports bra, an azure blue one that matched her eyes, had been visible for the world to see. It showed her beautiful S and her flat stomach, as well as Issei was trying his hardest on them, within limits. Akino's white top had been burned away throughout the training. What was left of it had been taken away from her. Issei remembered how they got into this position. Scene skip. After he and Akino had gotten to the school, he walked out to the old school building. There, Rias waited for them, on the outside. Well, it appears that someone got a lift. The king looked at Akino and her eyes shined at the muscle car. I can take you for a spin later. Issei shot back. If you manage to impress me. He added, and the two great ladies looked appalled at Issei, who just shrugged on the remark. You do know that I belong to the Gremory clan, Rias said, and I have gotten extensive training under them as well, Akino added. Very well. Then we can prove what you have learned by having a sparring match. Would you two be interested? Immediately, they doubled down as they knew what that meant. The matches with Kaneko and Kiba were enough information to know how much stronger Issei Hayato really was. Thought so. Now, ladies, please change into comfortable, loose clothing. I would prefer half training, but that wouldn't be appropriate for you. His eyes danced at Akino and her expression. Her drooling and thinking could be heard from his place. Although I can see that someone wouldn't mind that at all. Akino felt a hand going up her delightful ass as Rias was serious enough. Meet me outside on the training ground. Issei walked to the place as he stripped out his clothes. He was only wearing black trousers plus his comfortable walking shoes. They weren't looking to the part, but they were oh so comfortable. Rias was wearing a training jersey while Akino had her school gym outfit on. Issei took 4 seconds to breathe in, 4 seconds to count, and he breathed out. Ladies, I said comfortable clothing. Now, I will say it again. Rias crossed her arms under her sizable chest. Hayato-san, I do know my magic. The voice had a love for vocabulary. Well spoken, of course. Akino had a muffled giggle. You do, but you don't know everything. I do teach differently from what you might have learned from your mother or other teachers. Now, I would say we can have a quick warm-up. Issei opened a small magical circle as well. When you two are ready, let me know. Ria's hand showed her family's crest while Akino's hand tingled with energy. Issei could swear that he smelled lightning. Not abnormal, but this was different. Ready, Akino? Whenever you are, Rias. Akino released her lightning to Issei, who skipped through them. Despite her actions, he got closer to him. Rias, the king, hesitated a bit, but she pushed those thoughts to the side. She unleashed her power of destruction onto the white dragon. Issei just kept his hands up and blocked the power that was known far and wide in the world of the supernatural. The two ladies were horrified when they realized that Rias might have killed the hacker Yuku. Hayato-kun, Hayato-san, I'm okay. The dust settled and Issei had his hands thrown up. It looked like there wasn't a scratch on him. Don't hold back, you two. It would only prove to work against you. Issei used his own speed again as he raced to the two ladies. Opening their wings, the flight had proven their usage towards strays. Yet, they found that Issei rapidly caught up to them. Akino used again lighting that Issei avoided. He answered it with barrages of his energy which hit the queen. They burned through the gym outfit of Akino. It showed part of her delicious midriff, and even a bit of underboob. Did she forego underwear? Issei wouldn't put it past her. Rias fought back with her own power against Issei, who just continued to get closer to the two. Split. Rias and Akino flew in opposite directions as they continued to pepper Issei with their attacks. The dragon saw them move apart. They know the basics. They don't lack talent. That is in abundance. Rias fueled him again with the fury which Issei just answered back. Turning back to Rias while he continued to fly to Akino, Issei shot back several bouts of water magic. The crimson-haired princess felt the water hitting her while Issei saw that Akino had used her own magic on him. It felt like a shock, compared to what he usually faced. Experience they lack. I don't fault them. No, it's just not enough raw power. Wind raised by and cut through the clothes of Akino. Good thing that shame wasn't something that she usually felt. With only Rias and Issei around, there was no reason to feel that now. Issei didn't ogle her, as she had usually expected from men, although something told her that he admired beauty whenever he had a chance. Rias could see how he turned back to Akino. Although I feel that raw power isn't what they need. No, they need to be smarter. Issei raced back up to Akino. He felt like wrapping up this little match. I won't let you! Rias raced up to the two and Issei felt that now was a perfect time to unleash something that he had thought about. Heat dispersion. The shout caused an inferno of scalding hot air to come through. The two great ladies barely got any time to react, so Issei raced up around to them. He extended his wings to grab Akino, while he managed to grab Rias. The heat didn't have any damage to their bodies, which was fortunate, although the same couldn't be said about their clothes. When they are back to their senses, I'll teach them. I think they'll enjoy that. Issei tried to ignore the fact that he had two of the best sets of chests pressing against him. With huge stress on tried, as it was nearly impossible to do so. He wasn't blind to the attractiveness, but his bigger head told them they weren't just his to do as he pleased with. Not just yet. Scene skip. Akino was the first who found herself waking up. Her destroyed gym shirt had been removed, and in the middle of a circle stood Issei. Despite how the fight where she and Rias tried everything and more on him, Issei didn't even appear to be winded. Around them, a magical circle had opened, and despite her state of undress, Akino didn't feel chilled. Behind him, Issei had opened his wings and they seemed to be a source of heat. Turning her head, Akino witnessed how Rias was still out. "You're awake," Issei said as he sat there. Akino was somewhat happy that at least he didn't ogle her or looked pleased with himself. "How do you feel?" Akino wanted to fall back on a pair of pillows but found those were lacking. "Like a certain thing that comes out of you." Oh, so her manners to say words like shit hadn't been forgotten. What happened? Akino didn't feel particularly angry, only a tidbit disappointed in herself. And in the ones who taught her magic. "You two had a match with me, regarding magic. Now you both might get happy because right now, we are getting to the fun part. Does that fun part have anything to do with the fact that we are half?" Rias' voice caused the two to share a similar smile. The sight of Rias getting up and her bra doing its best to contain its treasure proved to be a wonderful image. "Hey, I am also sharing that." And yes, indeed, Issei was shirtless. Both women found that to be a wonderful sight as well. "I am first going to say a few things before I'll teach you other ways of magic. I doubt you'll like it." Issei didn't wait before he opened his mouth. "Starting with you, Rias. While you have the power of destruction, given by your mother, I got a feeling you're trying to copy your sister. I'll be the first one to say it." "Cut that out." Rias was startled to hear that. "What?" "I heard stories from your sibling. Surzex is, from what I hear, a monster in regards to his power. Your older sibling can level Japan without even batting an eye." "Quick question, Rias. Do you have his monstrous power?" Rias lowered her head. "No." "Then why are you wasting your power? In terms of guns, you're not a bullet hose. You should apply it as a sniper rifle. Powerful one-hit kills. Learn to use that. Don't worry, Papa Issei is going to let you read from his notes." The cheerful tone didn't stop the painful words from hitting Rias. "Plus, we should work on your cardio. While I doubt that you'll ever find yourself in a situation where physical violence would be needed, it can never hurt to be quick on your feet." Akino's small smile was washed from her face as Issei turned to her. "Same goes for you, Missy. While I can forgive Rias for her mistakes, I'm not doing that to you." Akino's eyes narrowed in on Issei, who ignored her. Era, is that all?" "No," Issei plainly stated. Somewhere, he was glad that he got his rocks off because those would otherwise be distracting. "I have a question for you, as well. Creativity? Ever heard of it?" "Oh, I can be creative, I assure you." Akino's smile would be compared to certain ladies in anime, but for Issei, her smile would be the same thing as a flea bite, to be ignored, not in your fighting style. Zapping something until it dies fails when you fight something that can either tank or avoid your attacks. Not to mention, the waste of the queen piece. Rias wanted to veer up from his insult but found that her body was too sluggish for that. Her face would make contact with the ground if Issei hadn't grabbed her. "Easy there." Maybe, Rias would enjoy being captured, but now, with the pride of her servant, Rias' eyes flamed at him. "Let me go! I do not allow my servant to be insulted. The truth is not an insult and reality is not an attack." Rias, the queen piece, it uses the three attributes of rook, knight, and bishop, correct? Issei Kami asked, to which Rias nodded. "Well, if I am not mistaken, bishop enhances magic, rook enhances defense, and knight enhances speed. So far, I see Akino-san fighting as a bishop. Happens quite a bit for I see devils. If you want your servant to fight better, then let her fight like that. And I'll teach you." Issei's calm smile was still on his face. "With that settled, I am going to follow up on my other way of teaching magic. Small and fun. And comfortable," Issei answered. "And for the reason why you are not wearing too much on top, that is part of the lesson." The girls didn't like what he said, but they could get behind it. Issei smiled. "Now let's try something else." The girls agreed that the second part of the lesson was a whole lot more fun. It was more enjoyable of having the hunk not being the crap out of you but helping you out on the magic. Sitting down, the girls were relaxed as they felt what Issei did to them. Feel your powers, let them flow through you. Channel them. See how they work. As a dragon, Issei had learned from a young age, and the lessons weren't pleasant nor fun. But they certainly proved to have merit as Issei showed Akino some of his own tricks. The fact that Issei forgot the concept of personal space was not exactly an issue for either beauty. It was refreshing of a male to treat them in such a manner. Your postures are too tense. Too strict. Relax. Akino could feel how Issei pressed at some points, which made her sigh happily while he helped himself to the soft points. There. Still, in a seated position, still half, Issei helped the queen, as Akino could feel his strong fingers touch her lower body. Issei was focused, not brain dead. Her appeal shined through, but unlike most males who were anywhere near the vicinity of the Y-girl, Issei kept his focus up. Try it again. Akino thought she would never learn anything new, but she found that this really helped her. Wow! The sphere had a size twice as big as she normally summoned, and that was pushing herself. Learn to implement those to your training, and you'll find it will come as easy as breathing. Akino smiled as Issei continued to give pointers. Rias found that he looked really good. Alright, your turn. Just like with her, queen, Issei touched Rias' body to learn from her. Because stress had seeped into her system, it proved to be harder. Rias, you're too stressed. Relax a little, I'm trying. Rias snapped back to Issei, who had a patient look on his face. Permission to try something? Rias didn't know why, but the heiress felt like she could trust him. Whistling a tune that had been heard before, Rias felt how Issei looked her over. Softly, he laid her hair to the right side of her body, and her back laid open for him. Issei's capable fingers and palms went over her back. When she had no clue, but he had also unclasped her brow. Catching it before it fell down, Rias wanted to shout, but she felt that the strength escaped her. Issei. The name turned into a, relax. Just enjoy it. She felt warm energy entering her body as Issei began to massage her. The energy infusing was something else, and Akino found the sight to be just a little bit too endearing. The glare of Rias made it clear that if she was to try to record or say anything, there would be merry hell to pay. Meanwhile, Issei continued to massage her. This chick is stressed beyond belief. What would a pretty girl like her have to worry about? He doubted that money or status was a problem. So what could it be? Most likely must be that favor that she wanted from him. Okay, you're good. Watch and learn. The entire afternoon came and went as the training evolved into Issei sharing his stories with the two great ladies. While he did use his charms on them, he kept a respectable distance between them. The two did find that he watched their bodies but quickly looked away. Issei would be the first to admit that doing this was a great deal of fun, as both Rias and Akino proved to be excellent listeners. Unfortunately, those things didn't last. Akino felt her hand burning. I'm sorry, sensei. But I have duties to attend. Sharing a look with Rias, Akino focused on Issei. Permission to leave the class? The queen requested. Issei shook his head while he admired her body. A guy would commit murder for touching those s. You don't need to ask. Good luck out there. Snapping his finger, Akino got dressed again in her school outfit. Feeling a bit playful, she skipped over to him. She wanted to be grateful to him. Pecking him on the cheek caused the white saint to turn bright red. He didn't guess that Akino could have that effect on him, but here, he was proven wrong. This was a wonderful experience. Please continue to provide them. With that, Akino left through the magical portal. Rias was smirking at the way that Issei reacted to her. She decided to add something extra to that. Maybe the crimson-haired princess could explain what she wanted from Issei. From what she had seen and experienced, Issei could be just the guy that she needed to save her from the problems she faced herself. Crawling over to her, Issei looked down at the very appealing sight of her s. They were heaving and still sweaty. It wasn't just the fact they were large, a personal favorite of theirs, but also because the shape was excellent. It took him just a few seconds to settle on her face. My eyes are up here. Rias snarked, although it wasn't as heavy as most women did when they found a man staring at their s. I got a hard time deciding what is prettier. After a few seconds, Issei switched from her s to her eyes and back to them. He settled on her eyes with a kind smile. Your eyes win, but not by a large margin. It's still not easy to decide for that. Rias wanted to shout at him, but she relented. She had long grown used to be looked at with lust, but Issei kept the distance she respected. And well, for a first, it brought flutters in her stomach. Well, thank you for the compliment. But Issei, can I talk to you for a second? The smile made her heart beat even faster. Weren't we doing that already? He asked, but the stern look caused Issei to take it seriously. Issei, I think that it's time that I explain to you what I really need you for. Raising his left hand, Issei watched her speak. What I need your power for. What I need your help for. The dragon remained quiet but just nodded once to let her speak. I'm engaged. The raise of his eyebrow and a small pang of jealousy filled his body. Issei was easily enough to keep his emotions in check, but now, he could feel something tug on him. I think this isn't the sort of engagement that you are happy for. Rias shook her head as she watched Issei. The man that my parents and Serzek saw fit to be my husband is a person that I refuse to marry. In my eyes, he's nothing more but a disgusting pig. Issei held his breath for a bit when he heard her speak of the man that was going to marry her. Let me go on a limb here. He has a peerage filled with girls and he uses them to relieve himself. Issei asked, and Rias nodded to him. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you believe me to be the knight in shining armor, I am not exactly pure in that regard either. I have been around the block. Issei had found that it was always better to be upfront. Unlike the explosion of anger, Rias just sighed as she watched him degrade himself. Have you ever forced a woman to do something she didn't like? Or take her just because you owned her? Honesty was the best policy, and Issei knew that. He had been as transparent as water, and he found no reason to stop doing that. That would go against my principles. I admire the beauty, and I find that for betting a woman, you need to treat her right. But I have never used that. Rias, can I speak bluntly? The heiress nodded to him. Most young devils that I have encountered who have their peerages set up to be like that, have a reason for that. How much I go against it, it's part of the deal. That being said, cupping her cheek, Rias had no idea why she let Issei touch him, but there was no reason to let him stop doing that. She nuzzled in his touch as she watched him speak. You are too good to be treated like that. It wouldn't be a rightful place for a girl like you. The strong voice was backed by his honesty. Yet, there was something in her body that knew the truth, and she wanted to hear it from Issei. Issei, if I can be honest. Dragons aren't exactly known for a monogamous nature either. She would find that the sheepish side of Issei was a nice change of pace. Looks like he wasn't that done with maturing either. Well, I'm working on that. My partner says that I am not that mature yet. But I will not force a girl to be with me. If I find a girl who, by a matter of speech, reacts to me, I'll take her in, but that will be on our own accord. Issei let her face go and watched the girl before him. But that is neither here nor there. This isn't about my love life. It's about the fact you want to avoid you ending up married to this sleazebag. Does he have a name? Riser Phoenix. The disgust filled Rias' entire body as Issei watched her talk. The name struck a weird chord with Issei. Phoenix. But where had he heard that name before? Alright. That aside, Rias, can you play all your card on the table? You're an immature devil. I'd say that you have a few years before this goes somewhere. Not a bad thing that you are looking for power now. The sadness on her eyelashes made Issei feel like he had just stepped on a major landmine. I would have that. But I have heard from my parents and sister that Riser and his parents want to hurry up the process. So that is why I want to ask you. Issei felt his heart tugging on his chest. It was clear how this weighed on Rias and how her faith, her entire future, and that of her and her peerage were placed on him. Issei realized that because he had promised Asia to Rias, the future of the little nun also landed on him. If Rias lost this match, Asia, Akino, and Kaneko would be going to this guy. Neither of those girls deserved to be married off to a guy like that, if only because he wanted them for himself. Issei would be mature enough to admit that he liked those women, but it wasn't just their bodies. Rias had a good sense of humor, and she was great to be around as she had some class, which was awesome. Akino was great for teasing back and forth, plus, Issei saw a kindred soul in her. How much they had in common, he was all too eager to find out. Kaneko and he got along better with their matches. Issei got more snacks from her, so Issei didn't want to hand those girls over to anyone. The white dragon would win them over. And with how closer Rias was getting to him, Issei was mesmerized by those beautiful eyes. Will you help me, Issei? Will you protect me? I will, Rias. That is a promise and an oath. The heat was going on and Rias leaned in closer to Issei. Nothing else needed to be said as Issei felt that it was now good enough. He wrapped an arm around her delicate shoulders and slowly pressed her closer to his chest as they watched the sunset. They just sat there contently watching the shadow of the day, as they didn't need anything else. Smiling at him, Rias found that she couldn't let her, queen, steal a march on him. Pecking him on the cheek, Issei felt those heat up again. But he felt there was no reason to complain about it. In fact, he welcomed it. It had been too long since a woman had that sort of effect on him. So he would take it for what it was worth and run with it. Scene skip. When Issei got back home, it had gotten dark. The full moon was already glowing and he didn't believe how late he made it. After Rias and he had recovered, he had taken her for a spin on his car and dropped her off. When he parked his Ford in his garage, he walked upstairs. The house had been quiet, which was something that he had expected. On the dinner table, Issei found the 3 uniforms and a note. Issei Hayadu. We have gotten over the information we have received. Asia Argento and the fallen angel Rainier are placed in your class 2B. It is up to you to make sure that they are watched over. The fallen angel, Middlet, has been transferred to a class with junior devils. The fallen angel, Kerlongsj, has been assigned as your homeroom teacher. It is up to you to find human aliases. Issei had already thought of a few names. Rainier had hers ready. We also inform you that they are assigned to the Occult Research Club where Rias Gremory and her peerage house. We hope this isn't an issue. Issei had hoped to start training his fallen angels, and the more they had, the more they would learn from one another. Plus, if Asia could get around the devils, Issei would find it was a great start. Next Monday, they are enrolled in our school. Best regards, Sona Shirtorai. Issei had to drop by the student council to thank them. And also to inform Sona of Sarakawa. Dragons rarely matched, but Issei found that something pulled him towards that girl. He would deal with one problem at a time. For now, he would see that the residents in his house would get a good place in the school. Going upstairs, he found that Middlet had taken up in her room. The room of Kerlongsj and Rainier had been empty, so when he opened the door of Asia's room, he was greeted by one precious sight. The two fallen angels had the nun sandwiched between them. Issei wondered if he could put his head between them and not the one that he used for thinking. The two fallen slept in peace, and he would let them sleep. So Issei closed the door. He did it to himself, so he crawled into his bed after stripping down to his boxers and closed his eyes. It was already Sunday, but he could use some sleep. His life was slowly filling up with more women around him. Finally maturing. "How, brat, shut it," Issei retorted. He had been too tired to argue with Albion. The next morning, "Issei, good morning." Asia knocked on the door, and Issei felt the vestiges of fatigue still linger in his body. He had to go to sleep on time that evening. Pushing the door open, the former nun walked into the room and she smiled at him. Issei prepped himself up, looking at the adorable blonde who shamelessly walked into the room as she smiled at him. "Morning, Asia. Slept well?" She nodded at him as she sat down on his bed. "I have seen our uniforms." Rainier-san handled it as she didn't trust Kerlongsj-san or Middlet-san. He had to thank Rainier for that, and Issei wondered how she would like those thanks. "Ready to start school?" The blonde nodded at him, but her smile fell from her face. Pushing up, he grabbed the small nun and put her in his lap. Her head lay on his shoulder. "What is wrong?" "Just all this. I still have a hard time believing this. We are here in Japan and I am going to become a devil." Ruffling her hair, Issei showed her a relaxed smile. "Don't worry. Rias-senpai is a very kind woman and I'll be there to watch over you. So you can relax? There is no pressure on it." But Issei remembered what Rias had told him. He would text her later and ask if he could share the story with the future club members. They had a right to know what was going to happen. "Thanks, Issei. So how is that school? A girl as cute as you? You'll have to flag off your admirers from both ES." Issei laughed at his own joke and Asia had a small giggle to accompany said joke. "If I told those admirers that I like you, what would happen, you think?" "Oh, great." The corruption of Asia had already begun to set in, but Issei felt that was a good thing. If not that, it would be amusing and very pleasurable. "I'll get a few more haters, but that is nothing new. If you don't destroy my reputation, the ones downstairs will do. Now, let's get breakfast. I smell cooking." As soon as the two came walking down the stairs, Rainier got up and waited until they came down. "We were worried that we would have lost our great dragon to the vices of the devils." Issei had a calm smile as she leaned in. "I am comfortable with my own vices, thank you." Kissing him caused Asia to look away and Middlet to glower at him. When Rainier let go of him, the raven beauty smiled at him. "Now, how did things go with those devils? They got a lot to learn." "Same as for you all. But we can't discuss that on an empty stomach." Issei's declaration was followed. Some yogurt, eggs and bacon, and bread were what was needed to fill their stomachs. Kerlongsj got the wink from Issei and enjoyed the attention that accompanied it. Issei enjoyed it especially given the fact that he hadn't eaten a single thing. The fatigue and the knowledge of what would happen to Rias had caused hunger to be forgotten. Now, his body caused him to pay for that. When they were done eating and the table was cleaned, Issei looked at the four ladies. "Did you all read the letter that accompanied your uniforms?" The collective yes made Issei happy. "Good, that means less reason for to explain what is going on. You all have seen the peerage that Rias Gremory has. Like it or not, we are going to work with them. I would appreciate it if you don't start anything. See them as fellow students. That being said, don't take any crap from them either." The three fallen angels nodded. "Now, Rainier, did you read the suggestion of the president?" "Yes. We have agreed to use the last name that I used when I courted you as a human. Amano. Is that fine by you, Issei?" The dragon nodded. "Good. Now, there is something brewing. But before I tell you about that, I first need to ask the person whose fight I'll be carrying out. Issei had run up to get his phone and before long, called Rias. Issei. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Is everything alright at your end? Yes. Rias-senpai, sorry to disturb you, but can I inform the four in my house what your problem is? It remained quiet for a few tense seconds before Issei heard an audible sigh. I doubt that it wouldn't hurt. You can, but it is on you if this leaks out. Issei's glare sent shivers of the fearful and pleasurable variety on the spines of the woman gathered. Do not worry. I doubt that would prove to be an issue. Thank you, Rias-senpai. Enjoy your Sunday. The same to you, Issei. Good day. With that done, the call closed and Issei looked at them. Rainier broke the silence. Red is in a mountain of trouble? Issei really had to thank her. While he didn't mind the corruption of Asia and the variety of UAL nature, he didn't want Asia to take up cussing. Not at least until she got to the age of 18. I would like it if you called her with the name Rias. Or Gremory-senpai. But yes, she is in a troublesome situation. She's in an engagement that she wants no part of, and she has asked of me to get her out of that mess. Any reason why you're telling us? What does it even matter to us? Middle asked while she kept her snark up. While I can keep you safe, my arrangement regarding your continued existence is due to the deal that I made with Rias-senpai and Sona-senpai. As long as they are overseers of that place, their deal stands with me. I can keep you four safe. If that changes, I doubt that her fiancé would have the same open state of mind. I don't like to think of those consequences. That did the trick for the four ladies in the room. Asia shuddered, Rainier blanched as she thought back on her demise, and Middle lost all her snark. Calawarner was the one who spoke. Issei-kun, what do you think is going to happen if her fiancé drops by? If things go fast, which they will, Rias would most likely be challenged to a rating game with that person. With just 4 peerage members and not that much experience, I think she relies on me to help her out. And I have agreed to that. Issei answered truthfully. He knew that most likely they wouldn't like that answer. So you intend to save her and get her in your bed? He would have expected that reply for any of the 3 fallen angels, but not from Asia. Asia, in my humble opinion, women like Rias-senpai and yourselves are ladies to be courted. While that is a very alluring idea, I much rather use the same route as I have done with you. You 4 should be aware by now that Issei is a dragon. They have that effect on people. My host is too soft to tell you, but he has saved you 4 from certain demise. Now, he is going to help out that Gremory girl and her peerage. The personal feelings from you 4 should be damned about this. None of you are his master, therefore, you cannot order him. Thanks for the help, Albion. Issei replied. He could be a bit too soft with this. Sleeping around was not an issue, but committing to a harem was another matter. And if those girls could get along, it would make matters easier. You heard what he said. Now, ladies. All other things considered, this isn't just school. This is you earning your freedom again, and I can see what will happen. Is there something else for now? When silence was all he heard, Issei smiled. Good, now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to study. I need to get my homework done. When he sat behind his desk, it was more his body that went on automat, but his mind was elsewhere. What was that all about? Downstairs. You have at least 8 women falling for you and you're not standing up. I had expected better results from you. Given your past. In case you forgot, I am experienced in UAL intercourse. Not in dealing with harems. That is why I stood up for you. Partner, monogamy isn't a way you can live. Many of my previous hosts had harems. Did those usually work out? If the women were of the supernatural races, yes, as they had long been used to polygamy due to the Great War. But the best way to make them work together is if the women were agreeable with one another. Given the fallen and devils, that is not going to happen. The best way to become friends is to shed blood. Which is something that is going to happen. Issei answered back to his host. Issei, you're one of my younger hosts that I had the pleasure of having. I'll guide you through it, but in the end, it comes down to you. Issei smiled in his head when he heard that line. Good that someone had his back. Rias-senpai and her peerage are different from Rainier and her friends. Albion, what is the most likely outcome of this? If you and that phoenix come to fight, I am not sure how that fight would go. If you manage to save the Gremory, you're most likely the person that would have to follow up. I heard stories from Surzek's Lucifer. You should know of them as well. You think that the Mao would give me issues? From what I heard, the power Lucifer commands could rival dragons. In your current state, it would be wise to stay on the good side of Surzek's. But as you often say, one thing at the time, mate. That was good enough for Issei to occupy himself with the issues that went on. He could prepare for Monday as he had a prediction. Scene skip. In the early hours, right before the first period, the principal stood before Issei's class with a few announcements. Class, as you all are aware, there was no homeroom teacher for this one. Therefore, I am happy to introduce you all to your new homeroom teacher, Kerlongsj Amano. Issei watched how she walked in and the class got into an uproar. A maroon turtleneck with sleek black pants that hugged her figure nicely. Her shoes were the usual ones of heels. Most of the guys and some of the girls couldn't keep their approval hidden. Issei's reaction was more measured. He loved the sight of her, and it confirmed the idea that subtlety could be oh so why. Good day, my name is Kerlongsj Amano-sensei. I have been asked to become your homeroom teacher. I'm looking forward to you. The principal coughed, and the attention was snapped to him. Well, I see that you have this covered. Can I ask you to introduce the other new members in this class? The brunette smiled like an angel and nodded. Of course. It would be my pleasure to introduce my cousin. Issei was glad that the story would stick. You can come in. Asia and Rainier walked into the class, which made the uproar of Kerlongsj seem small. Unlike the new teacher, Rainier had chosen a younger outfit. Issei really wondered why he believed that a younger version of Akino Himejima walked in his classroom. They looked really close. Meanwhile, Asia was a bit shy. The shy wave got enough hearts to melt for her, most likely, because of the way how she waved at them. When she saw Issei, she relaxed. Especially after she got a seat right next to him. Hey Issei, morning Asia? He simply returned the small greeting. Haters were going to hate, and Issei couldn't bring himself to care. When Yuma got her seat in front of him, Issei also saw the glares coming at him. Especially after the wink she sent his way. But what did he have to fear? No one in the right mind would challenge him to a fight. Scene skip. The day had gone by and Issei had left the girls to the questions. He was happy they didn't reveal they lived with Issei. The fewer people who knew of that, the better it was. Accidental deaths were a major pain. His primary worries about how the three would adapt to a 21st century school were unfounded. They took to the class like a fish took to water. Kerlongsj also did well in teaching her class. Later that evening, Issei had escorted the two ladies to the occult research club. From what he had seen, Rainier enjoyed her Yuma personality a little too much. Issei had a slight suspicion that for the first time in literal eons, she could take it easy. No longer to worry about backstabbing colleagues, no worries about her next meal, or anything else. No, the protection that Issei had granted her had given her a life that she had so desperately wished for. Inside the clubroom, the place was already full. Kerlongsj had taken a seat on the couch while she was being watched like a hawk. Middlet had looked pissed while she glowered next to Kerlongsj. On the other couch sat Kaneko, who had been eating a bag of chips. Kiba had taken up a seat to polish a sword while on the desk stood Rias and Akino. While the heiress had been a bit more sympathetic, Issei hadn't missed the glares that Akino was boring in the fallen. Issei decided that as long the queen didn't act out against them, he wouldn't interfere. One of his personal policies was not to get involved in the personal business as long it didn't concern him. The glares that Akino sent to the three weren't an issue. If she started to send lightning instead of glares, it would become his personal issue. So how was your day? Rias asked as Issei walked through. Asia and Rainier could finally let go, and they started to chat with Kerlongsj and Middlet. Issei dropped a bag of peanuts to Kaneko, who let a high five pass by. No reason for me to complain. What about yourself, senpai? Issei walked up to Rias, who had the same smile on her face. I have agreed on this, and for now, I haven't seen issues arise. I hope that will remain so. The loud words were enough for the three to nod. Rainier let go of her chats and walked over to the two. No reason for me to stir up any trouble. At least, not something I am personally responsible for. Rias and Rainier shared a look. Oh yes, Rias understood those words and she hadn't a reason to hold that against Rainier. I hope so. If you need anything, I'll let you know. Issei didn't know why, but in his guts, he felt that Rias and Rainier would get along great when they got past their awkwardness. And he lived this long to listen to his instincts. With that settled, Asia-chan. The blonde joined them. Rias had a kinder smile on her face, and her eyes on her face when the nun stood before her. Have you considered my offer? Asia nodded shyly, and? There was no pressure on her tone. Not one word of coercion, just a friendly update. I'll need some time to think it over. But Issei-san has told me about. She trailed off those words which made Rias understand. The three members of the peerage looked at their king, like she had grown a second head. Bucho, don't tell me. Did you really, Bucho? Rias, have you? The reactions of Kaneko, Kiba, and Akino were to be expected. I have informed Issei about our situation. In return, he asked me to tell the four under his protection. Given the fact that I want Asia Argento in my peerage, It is nothing more than fair than to tell her the situation she would be placed in where the worst come to pass. Rainier put a friendly hand on her shoulders. Unlike what Rias would have guessed, it didn't fill her with revulsion, but she looked up at the eyes. We heard of it. For what it's worth, sorry to hear about your situation, Red. Placing her own hand above the one of Rainier, the fallen felt a friendly squeeze. Any reason why you are so concerned about my engagement? Issei is our owner. But if someone else comes around, our situation might change. I'd rather have you who gives us freedom as well. And I promise you that we are going to help you out. Rias shared a look with Rainier. Yeah, she would like that girl, and the help of her and her friends would be welcome indeed. So for that, Rias thanked her. Well, it's indeed your own best interest. Therefore, Issei. The dragon snapped to her. I was hoping if you could continue your training with us. We clearly have a lot to prepare for. Issei mulled over her words. There is just one question that I have. And one that I need an answer for. When do you believe your fight with Riser Phoenix will take part? Rias looked down at the ground. I was promised that I could finish my education in the human realm. But lately, my parents, sister and Riser himself have been pressuring me to say yes to this and have already started the engagement. I have no idea how much time I have in between. Before Issei could even ask what that really meant, a magical circle opened in the clubroom. It wasn't one that showed fire but yet a full blue one, which made Issei wonder who would come through. In the middle of the clubroom appeared a beautiful maid. She appeared to be a few years older than the most who had gathered there, save for the exception of Kalwarner. Issei guessed that her age didn't betray her looks, as some would guess she was in her early 20s. Her hair was long and silver in a long braid on each side. Blue bows complemented those at the ends. The rest was let down with smaller braids. The uniform appeared to be a blue and white French-made outfit with long sleeves and a white-made headband. Despite the uniform, it didn't hinder her beauty. Issei hoped that Rias would have informed her about the circumstances, or that the maid in question wouldn't ask about it. My lady? It has been a while. Grafia. What are you doing here? Rias asked in a sort of disbelief. Her eyes settled on the four, who felt the incessant need to be stretched to the wall as Issei walked in front of them. His eyes calculated over this woman. She was strong. No, just strong. She was powerful. Whoever this Grafia was, it was clear she was one of the strongest, if not one of the most beautiful women Issei had ever seen. But she was here for a good reason, given the fact that respect came from the devils gathered around in the room. Might I ask what is going on around here? Your parents have allowed overseeing this town as long you kept our presence known. Issei knew that he was walking into a lion's mouth, but he wouldn't take crap from just anyone. Isn't it in the nature of devils to talk and tempt others into making agreements? If you are mentioning the one standing there, that is because Rias and I made an agreement. The eyes of Grafia settled on Issei, who had a calm look on his face. And who might you be? Issei Hayadu. His gauntlet appeared on his left arm. This generation's Hakuryuku. Grafia looked horribly surprised from seeing what Issei was. The bigger question was why Rias was affiliated with him. Oh, and what is the reason that the Hakuryuku, also known as the White Saint, is doing in this city? Issei had to remember to lecture Rias about this. She could have told some people about him. That's a long story. Very short is that I came back home. But you're not here for me. You're here for someone else, and that person has asked me to help her. His eyes signaled to Rias, who stood ready as they watched the maid size up the boy before her. She could very easily fight this boy and walk away from him. Grafia knew that. But when she saw Issei, the ultimate queen, felt something in her guts. This fight would cost her more than she would like. I am, yes. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Issei Hayada-san. Bowing to him, Grafia made her way to Rias. The eyes narrowed at the girl she viewed as a little sister. Rias Ojusama. I am here on behalf of myself, Surzek-sama, and your parents. The talks of your engagement. It has been decided that it'll be stepped up a notch. Rias didn't let the shock wash over her, but her eyes desperately looked for Issei. The dragon hadn't moved and he stood there. Ready, and nothing betrayed that he wouldn't make good on his promise. My parents and sister are moving too fast on this. I have always said that I wouldn't marry Riser. And I was promised that I would have until I graduated. Things have changed. It wasn't an excuse, and Rias knew it. Unless you, Ojusama, have a suitable suitor, the house has decided to make things official with the son of Phoenix. Rias couldn't believe how they could just do this. Throw her entire life away. Just like that. Her life, her happiness. Did it mean anything to her family? What else do you bring to my door, besides this news, Grafia? Rias did not show the effect that the words brought on her. The maid had expected this reaction. Her master put her in a fickle spot, that, in case you would refuse, this could be settled with a rating game. I have only come here to pass you the news. But be warned, Rias Ojusama, that Riser Phoenix Sama isn't obliged to comply with those demands. That is all." The circle opened and the maid disappeared through it as if she was never in the clubroom. As soon as that happened, Rias crashed down on the desk. Issei had never imagined that someone like her could cry, but the long wails made him reconsider that thought. Her entire peerage came around her. Kaneko put her head on her lap while Akino rubbed her shoulders while Kiba took care of her back. It barely had any effect on her. Even the fallen angels and Asia were taken aback. The sweet nun even walked over and softly rubbed her arm. Rias barely recognized that comfort as she felt her world sinking down. Issei felt his heart tugged out of his chest by her reaction. How much did Rias despise this riser to let herself go like this? Putting a heavy, comforting hand on her shoulder, Rias looked up to Issei, who had a kind and warm smile on his face. Wiping away her tears from her eyes, they spoke from bottomless desperation and despair. It was like he was the only thing that could save her. "That does it. I am going to get you out of this marriage, even if it kills me." Issei's declaration was solemnly spoken, and all beings in the room agreed to those words. He remembered the words that Grafia spoke about this arrangement. "Rias, this rating game is the only shot we'll have. A shot in the dark far as I can see. As you remember, I'm not your servant, and despite it all, I won't become yours. But any shot on how we get this guy agreeing with this game?" Rias heard him speak. She leaned in closer to Issei and whispered so softly in his ear as she spoke of her plan to get Riser to sign his own trap. She really was a devil. Issei smiled when she told him her plan. "I agree. This plan isn't just very agreeable, it's very rewarding and cathartic." Issei also realized that it showed what Rias thought of him. He couldn't argue that he liked this idea. "So can I count on you?" "On every part?" Issei nodded to Rias. "I think we should discuss this in private. Would you all be so kind?" The rest of the peerage and group understood, and after a word or action of comfort, they left the crimson-haired princess. When they had walked through the door, Issei's eyes were soft as he waved at Asia and Rainier. When they settled on Rias, they turned serious. "While I am not taking back my words of what I said, your idea is rewarding and cathartic. This does lead to another development, Rias." "Are you sure about that?" Rias raised an eyebrow when she heard Issei talk. "If you carry this out and this goes, it would simply mean that I would take Riser's place. Are you fine with that?" Rias nodded to his question. "I do not intend to ruin my clan. I intend to continue my bloodline and take a husband. And it might sound weird, but I'd much rather choose you, instead of Riser. Do you see a problem with this plan?" Issei barked a laugh as he looked at the heiress. "Have you lost your mind, Rias? If you are willing to have me, I am fine being your guardian." He got more serious though when he thought about this idea. "While I am not saying that I disagree with this idea, we will go through the route as I would normally do." Rias' face was elated when she heard that line. "Does that mean?" "Yes. Rias Gremory, when I save you, would you be so kind to date me?" He would have loved to hear a yes from her, but the kiss that burned with passion was just as good as not better. "Score!" Issei said as his arms wrapped around her delicate and soft frame. No way in hell he was ever going to hand her over to some shitbag who thought he had any right to her. If Rias chose him as her lover, then he would act like one. And as any good lover would do, he would protect the ones that he loved. Scene skip. When the peerage of Rias Gremory entered the clubroom, the sight of their king was a polar opposite of how they had left her the day before. The peerage didn't know what Issei had told Rias or what Rias had asked of him. The sight thought was as adorable as it was mystifying, at least for Kiba and Kaneko. Akino had a demure giggle at the sight of Rias sitting in Issei's lap. The queen hadn't expected Rias to take up a march on her. She had taken up the chair as usual, but this time, Issei sat behind her. His arms were wrapped loosely around her middle as she looked over the papers. Due to his height, his head was above hers. Issei lazily waved at the peerage, who still had the flabbergasted look on their faces. Rias had explained to him what was going on, and she had requested that he left his angels and Asia home. It was already hard enough to explain to her family what she had done. She didn't want Riser to go overboard on her pick. If the overbloated ego of him wouldn't already get the better of him by the sight. It was Kaneko who broke the silence. "Bucho?" Looking upon her, Rook, Rias addressed her. "Yes, Kaneko? Do you want me to take out the trash, or did you willingly go to sit on his lap?" Issei wasn't even insulted by her words. It helped that Kaneko was a small, adorable girl. Everyone was nicer to her. "I prefer you don't," Rias answered, and the glare that Issei got from the first year made the warning clear. "Make her cry and I'll do my best to make you cry." Rias had another giggle ready for her. Era. "Rias, I didn't expect you to be so aggressive. Your talk with Issei-kun last night did wonders." The smile that Rias gave, was a warning to her best friend. She had a good feeling about how Akino felt around Issei. But she wouldn't just let her take a piece of Issei. Indeed. I have found a solution to my problem. Kiba's uneasy laugh made him wonder if he got senile. How exactly a solution, Bucho? Too much of a gentleman. Her parents did wonders with him. My family complains about me not having a suitable husband. Hence why I picked one myself. Ria's words were so incredulous that none of her peerage could believe what she had just said. Luckily, their minds also understood what Issei could do. Issei and Rias had a long talk about their agreement. While Issei had not a single problem with having a relationship with the bombshell, marriage wasn't something on his mind right now. Rias would pick Issei as her fiancé and later they could see through that whole thing. Issei realized that this would mean he would bind himself to the devils. No longer would he be a neutral party in this city, he would be an ally to the devils. While neither Rias nor Sona could order him as a servant for the church, it meant that he would never be able to walk in Rome again. But he couldn't care. Saving beautiful girls was a calling. Glad that you finally start getting serious about a harem. It is about time, brat, although the color of her hair pisses me off. Kenneth, I'm more surprised that she would play your tune, regarding your fallen. Rias realizes that she is asking and can't make demands. Besides, it's not like I am that unreasonable. She'll need to get along with the fallen. Do you think that will be easy? The quickest way to become friends is to shed blood, tears, and sweat together. And something tells me that we'll have plenty of that. The thoughts were cut short as a blue circle appeared and in the middle of it, Grafia appeared. Her eyes widened as she saw Rias sitting in the lap of Issei. The dragon gave a nod to her. The maid wasn't pleased with the development. Issei's eyes didn't leave her body. She was strong, very strong. The only reason why he wasn't thrown around the room was that Grafia was not going to hurt Rias. Ojusama, what is the meaning of this? Rias had an innocent smile on her face as she watched the ultimate queen come closer to the pair. I have made a resolve. I am not going to let my family dictate my fate. Rias was relieved that she and Issei had come to an agreement on how to handle Grafia and Riser. The eyes of the queen narrowed at Issei, who was as calm as a cucumber. Hayata-san, I would appreciate it if you could move. Issei looked at her, back to Rias, and then shook his head. Nah, not feeling it. The only person who could get me to move agrees with me, so I am good where I am. The eyes of Grafia narrowed even further. Grabbing his arm, the Silverette felt the power behind his arm. Do you understand who you're talking to? Yes. I understand you're very much capable of killing me. The only question is how much of this county would remain, if Rias would look at you ever again, and if you got any working limbs. Issei let his gauntlet appear and that did the trick for Grafia. My fight isn't with you, Grafia-san. Rias' eyes signaled to the woman that she had found an answer to her situation. The queen of her older sibling had questions, but those had to wait. It appeared that Rias had found an answer. When this was over, Grafia would have a long talk with Issei. It had to wait though, as an orange-red circle caused the room to be filled with flames. The cry of a bird could be heard over it. All of the residents had a different reaction to it. Kaneko didn't want to look at the brightness of it while Akino looked at the flames. Her teasing smile had fallen off her face. Kiba glanced at Issei, who nodded at him. He had no clue, but it appeared that the knight trusted Issei to keep Rias safe. Rias stiffened when she glared at the flames. Issei made a loose chain of his arms around her delicate middle, right below her bountiful chest. I'm here. Not anywhere else. He whispered in her ear. As soon he watched the man enter the room, his feeling to help Rias didn't just redouble but tripled. The man's suit appeared to be well made, although Issei guessed that he took notes from Japanese delinquents with the open shirt. The man had an arrogant look on his face as he turned to the woman that would be his bride sitting in the lap of Issei. His eyes bore at Issei, who had his arms around the girl. The glare that he received from Issei made it clear that he had dipped his hands on Rias. Rias, what is the meaning of this? Riser hopes you were informed that Riser would visit. Rias' eyes had the sweetest look, but the amount of bile that came out of her mouth was poisonous. I was informed indeed. It appears that my family has taken up a faster note. I wonder if you had anything to do with that? Riser was annoyed by the reaction of his woman-to-be. His eyes went to Issei, who was sitting in a calm fashion, but the calm exterior hid one message. Not getting your hands, she is mine. The phoenix strolled over to the desk. His hands slammed on the wood. Issei hoped that he had no need for holy magic to teach this asshole a lesson. Indeed. My dear, you have no choice. Riser is annoyed beyond belief, but he will remind you that the contract has been clearly set. The underworld is our home. Lower-class devils and other reincarnated beings are taking over. You, as heiress of one of the remaining pillar families, must be responsible for having other purebred devils for our survival. Tapping his arms, Rias made clear to Issei that he could let her go. He did so, and she veered up. Proud and defiant, she glared at Riser. Issei moved out of the chair and leaned on the desk. Sitting on the right side of Rias, he let her speak. It was the fastest way he could stop Riser from hurting her. I did not agree to this, and I wasn't asked my opinion. I was indeed informed last night that the engagement proceeded. Grafia informed me that unless I had a suitable suitor as a partner, I have the right to choose my partner. Riser glared at Rias. The rejection didn't sit well. That right has been forsaken as you are heiress of the clan. It's not for yourself but for the good of your clan. Is it really such a burden to marry me? Many of the underworld would gladly marry a child from the house of Phoenix. Issei coughed when he heard her talk. The two looked at him. Rias was told that if she didn't have a suitable suitor, the engagement would be official. Too bad for you in the underworld, she has made her choice. Myself. His glare extended to Grafia. Tell Surzex and her parents that I, Issei Hayadu, the hacker Yoku of this generation, accepted her proposal. If that is the case, there is no reason for complaints. The mouth of Grafia wanted to fall open by the open brazenness. Issei focused back on Riser, whose head got an ugly purple by the rudeness of the dragon. What is the meaning of this? How dare you, a filthy human dragon, take what is rightfully Riser's? The fist aimed at Rias was blocked by Issei, who kept the fire of the phoenix at bay. It barely burned through him. She is not yours. Rias chose me willingly. But I think that we can settle this another way. Issei was ready to pull out Joyous. What would be left of Riser wouldn't be enough to feed the fishes. Enough. As a representative of both the Gremory family and as Queen, as Surzex Lucifer, I will not allow further conflict. The demonic energy might be invisible, but it was there. Issei didn't even respond to it while Riser struck back. There was a subclause to this contract. If one would come to disagree with the contract, this could be settled by a rating game, unofficial of course, with the victor deciding the final outcome. Rias smiled as she heard the words while Riser glared at her. Issei looked back at Grafia. I am not the devil and I do not wish to become one. As this rating game is unofficial, I take there is a way that I can partake in this game. As suitor chosen by Rias, the ultimate Queen nodded at him. We will find a way how you can partake in this game. You can play as an unofficial benefactor under Rias Ojusuma's command. Perfect. That way, Riser can teach this mutt an important lesson. Issei could barely himself back from killing this douche. After all, even if you were to fight with Rias, you are still outnumbered. Besides that, Riser has been undefeated in rating games while Rias has never fought one. Waving his hand, another glyph that bore the mark of Phoenix appeared. From out of the fire, 15 girls appeared. Issei counted them while he looked them over. Bah, what a bore. That fledgling only has 15 under his wing. That is quite a high number if you were to ask me. Partner, you have been in this city for just a few weeks and already have 5 women falling for you. Within a year, you will outnumber this brat. And women earned is better than women gained. Just like with honor, Issei looked the girls over. It was important to see how a fight would go as he analyzed the ladies that Riser saw fit to claim as his. The Queen appeared to be the most mature member of the group. It looked like her eyes matched the hair. Deep purple, and well, she was quite beautiful. The clothing was revealing though. The blue tunic had gold accents, and the pale skirt was too short to be reasonable. Issei wondered how she would fight like that. The white overcoat had no shoulder armor. Like most queens, Issei guessed she fought with magic. The bishops were also magician users. The first one was dressed in a kimono, and it had a nice color pattern. Her black hair and golden eyes shined at her master. The other one was something that made him wonder. Despite the dress-up that made her come from a fairy tale, Issei found that she and Riser shared a resemblance. He guessed she was a family member. The rooks looked like they were ready for a fight. The first one that he focused on made him rethink the missions that he fought in more liberal places of the church. The punk outfit was just a jacket and jeans. She couldn't be out of place in a metal or rock festival. Her gloves, boots, and ripped jeans were just par for the course. Her mask did even more. He would know quite a few exorcists or hired guns who would love to hang out with her. The other, Rook, wore a Chinese dress that didn't leave anything to the imagination. What showed was the hair buns, and the blue eyes made her, even more, stand out. Just like the Rooks, the knights came prepared. Issei guessed that someone had some ideas about how they looked. A mix from days past in the human realm, but mixed in one outfit that looked stupid, but if it worked, it wasn't stupid. The steel chest plate came from Europe, together with the sword and a dagger, but jewelry was also added to her outfit. The other one had long dark hair, and she barely wore any armor. She had changed safety for mobility. The large two-hander wouldn't be an ideal sword for that. Unlike the other ones, the pawns didn't look that ready for a fight. Issei counted that Riser had 3 sets of twins. One pair was maid outfit, another one looked like some cat girls, while the last pair wore gym outfits. They appeared to be the smallest ones. The 2 that stood out made Issei think the mind of Riser belonged in the sewers. While he loved to have some dirty thoughts, a peerage wasn't a place to show it off. The first one wore some sort of showgirl outfit that showed way too much skin, while the other one had a light haori and coat. She wore a staff. Issei wondered how that would be used. What do you see, low blood S? See how my peerage looks? Issei just turned back to Riser as he was done analyzing. This was just helping the peerage of Rias out in a big way. I see, and I expected what I saw. It appears more to me that those girls have another function than fighting in raiding games. Makes me wonder how you got undefeated in all of them. Walking up to Riser, the glare intensified as Issei stood before him. I know your type. You're the type of sleazebag that needed to have a peerage to get girls in your bed. While that can't be faulted, I am not handing Rias over to you. Riser's fury grew when Issei spoke those lines. What do you know? The fact that in my book, ladies have to be courted. And it's clear you haven't known of that. Otherwise, why would Rias choose me over you? The Phoenix wanted to fuel the fires in his hand as he watched Issei talk to him. I had plenty of women share my bed. But that was on their terms. I mean, I heard of it. Peerages tend to that need. Not that I blame you for it. I would probably be the same. Issei would congratulate the guy if he wasn't pissing him off so much. But Rias isn't a woman you can do the same with. She has to be courted. Riser glared at him. Enough. The cold voice of Grafia quelled any fires that could spread. You can have your fight on the raiding game. For now, we will see that Issei Hayato can participate. Riser smiled as he heard that. Very well. I will fight you in that game. I do hope that we come to fight. I will kill you that in game. After all deaths in the game are accidental. With that, the Phoenix left, and Issei looked at the place where he stood. He wished that Rainier or Asia were there to calm him down. He felt 2 pairs of hands around his. The one of Rias he expected to feel as she clung to his left hand. The other one was Kaneko Tuju. He had no clue why, but Issei looked at the youngest member. Calm down, Chief. It won't do any good. It appeared that he earned a few points in her book. Looking at Grafia, he hoped that she could now drop the act. I will inform the houses of this raiding game. As you are inexperienced, Ojusama, you're allowed to train for 10 days. In the meantime, we will make you participate in that game, Issei Hayato. Also, the temperature dropped significantly in the room. I hope you meant those words. Of what you said about Rias Ojusama. Do not worry, little devil. He will fight for Rias. And about the idea of an heir, my partner got his own ideas for that. I'll give Rias what you all find so needed from her. But solely on her terms. I feel myself a bit too young to become a father now. And yes, I will protect her. Grafia examined the young man before her. He was honest and powerful, and it appeared that if Rias had picked him, there would be a good reason for that. Very well. I'll inform my master about this. I wish you all good luck. She disappeared in a circle as she came in, and a few seconds were tense. It was Akino's giggle that breathed life back into the room. Well, it appears Grafia-san likes you. Incredulous, Issei turned to the Queen of Rias. She does? That didn't appear to me though. If she didn't like you, she would have killed you, Chief. That is not a joke. Issei heard the dry voice of Kaneko and found he would take her words as gospel from now on. The youngest let him go, and Rias looked at him. Now, with just her peerage and Issei around, Rias continued the experience from last night. Issei. The squeal wasn't ladylike, but no one cared as their king gave Issei a kiss as he wrapped his arms around her waist. He twirled her around as he smiled. Putting her back on the ground, he smiled. Rias looked flushed as her eyes were mesmerized by the dragon. You can defeat Riser, right? You know what I can do. The 2 of us wouldn't be an issue, but this is going to be a raiding game. I will help you and the other girls. Do you mind if I take the fallen angels along for this training? Rias shook her head. Maybe if Asia could spend some time, she would join the peerage. Not at all. We will need a day to prepare. My family owns a manor where we can train in peace. I hope they wouldn't mind. As long they behave. Issei winked at her. If they step out of line, you have my permission to punish them. Just don't maim, mutilate, or kill them. That reminds me. What that sleazebag said. About deaths in raiding games. Issei could feel a dark chuckle building up. Don't. Kaneko scolded him like he was a naughty puppy. Rias sighed. He's a high-class devil. Even in that, if you killed him, you would be in a world of trouble. Besides, wounds of him can be healed by his fire. Issei smirked when he heard that. I wonder what will die first. His regeneration or my abilities? Don't place your bets, you will all know how it will go. The peerage felt hopeful when they heard those words. The future of Rias could turn around and Issei would be there to save her from her fate. Scene skip. When Issei got back home, it was easily past midnight. The peerage had spent working on the raiding game and all that it contained. Issei had dreaded such an outcome, but he didn't complain. He stayed behind and helped the peerage out as they worked things through. The house was quiet, but the TV that he had bought was still on. There was just one occupant. Rainier was in her mature form with her wings out, but she wore a dark blue shirt and some shorts. Issei hoped she wasn't mad as he texted that he would be home late, but he would explain all when he got home. Issei. Well, the way she had said his name gave him the signal that he was in the clear. Jumping off from the couch, she threw her arms around his head. The kiss was fantastic as Rainier kissed him. Her tongue slipped into his mouth, and Issei let her have her fun. He was getting lightheaded with how she kissed him. When they let go, a thin line of saliva connected them. You miss me? It's way past our bedtime. What the hell went on with Rias and her merry band of devils? Issei sighed as he heard of the woman before him. Who was he, so blessed to have so many girls around him that seemed to like him? Rias is a bad spot. You know what I told you for last night about her engagement. We just settled that piece to make sure that we are going to have this fight. Rainier nodded when she heard what Issei told him. You know of my plans. It surprises me that you didn't object. The fallen angel shrugged when she heard it. We are your slaves. It is not our place to question their master's decisions. You have done the same for us. And well, I can come around with her. Good, cause I want you three with Asia and me when we go and train with the peerage. Rainier looked puzzled when she heard Issei's declaration. We are going to do what? Issei sighed as he placed his hands on her shoulders. Rias got 10 days to train for this raiding game. We will need to prepare for our match. I would like it if you could come around with that training. It can be a serious help to get them in shape. Asides from that, I need to whip your asses to shape. Rainier rolled her eyes when he heard that line. It gave her an idea for something good. How about you tap that ass? Because if we are going to the devils, then I will need something to keep me sane. The dragon decided that he could humor her. Scooping her up, Issei carried Rainier to his bedroom. It would be a quickie as both were exhausted. Rias could forgive him when they showed up late. In another bedroom, Asia was sound asleep. A small smile found a way to her face as she had made up her resolve. She would talk about this with Rias and Issei tomorrow. Asia wouldn't lose anything to her. Destiny had made it clear that she belonged to Rias. Scene skip. The night had been short, very short. Issei woke up very well though. Turning his head, he was greeted by the sight of Rainier, who was as the day she was created. The same went for him. The dragon felt relieved though. Good morning, Issei-sama. The door went open after a knock. Kerlongsj walked into the room as she watched the two. Morning, Kala. We got called this morning by Rias Gremory. She explained that you received a map of where the training would take place. Would you be so kind to explain to your servants what is going on? Issei sniffed the air. Dear God, he couldn't love those women anymore if he even tried. I'll explain over the course of breakfast. We are going to have a few rocky days ahead of us, I can imagine. You were home late as well. Issei sighed as he got out of his bed. The brunette didn't make attempts to divert her eyes as Issei walked over to her. Grabbing her hair, he pressed a kiss on her. Issei made her focus her eyes on him. I'll explain when we are seated and when we are eating. He walked back to the bed. Shaking Rainier awake wasn't too hard. Morning, Issei. She slurred as the first she saw was Issei. It was the start of a beautiful day. Morning, Rainier. Now get dressed. We are going to be on the road in 3 hours at the latest. On the table, Issei explained what happened in the clubroom, his declaration, and how that changed everything. He also told the 4 ladies what he expected of them. A small case with some clothes and some extras would be all that he wanted from them. Middlet had kept her grouching for herself. Issei hoped she would continue to do so. Asia had told Issei what she had in mind. Now she found a new home. Issei had accepted her idea. He hoped that Rias would agree, but he doubted she would mind. Within 2 hours, they were in his Ford and they were driving to the manor that Rias owned. As none of Issei's group was part of her peerage, they couldn't teleport to the location or the foot of the mountain, so Issei drove to the place. There were some chats between that, and ground rules were made. Rias was their host, so they had to be polite. Issei had given her permission to lay down punishment if they stepped out of line. It was a good ride to be out on the road and driving to the place while Issei began to think about the raiding game. He was strong, but there was no way that he could fight 16 devils all alone. So that was why he would use the training of the peerage to get them up in shape. Issei didn't make any illusions that he couldn't get the devils of Rias to his level, but there was enough creativity to make things work. He would take them higher. When they finally got to the manor on the hillside, Issei really wondered how Rias saw this as a cabin in the woods. Issei had slept in accommodations that made this look like a luxury hotel. It had more floors than most houses, and Issei smelled sulfur. He guessed there would be hot springs around. That could do wonders for tired bones. The place appeared to be abandoned, but Issei knew better. Issei honked 2 times, and he could hear shouts from the woods. "We're here!" Coming out of the woods, the devils appeared, and Issei looked them over. "Sorry, we are a bit late." Issei leaned against his car as his eyes wandered over the forms. "No worries, I am glad that you got here so soon. Good day to you all 4 as well." The Fallen and Asia had different reactions. Middled had a brisk nod. Asia smiled at Rias while Rainier gave a 2-fingered salute. "Rias, is there a place to park my car? We'll change and help you out. Oh, and before I forget, there is someone who would like to ask you something." Asia nodded and she got out of the car. "I have been thinking about your offer, Kuoh. I accept your offer. Please make me a devil." The blonde bowed to Rias, who was a bit dumbstruck. Issei shrugged as he watched the two. There were varying reactions. The devils of Rias had an accepting look while the Fallen had some sort of agreement. It appeared that things were just getting a bit more interesting. The entire group of devils looked accepted by the request by the blonde nun who bowed for the king. Rias, on one hand, was overjoyed by the request of Asia, but she had found this was also sudden. "Asia-chan, raise your head." The nun did so as she was ordered while the remaining girls got out of the car. "Any reason why you have chosen for this?" A lumphful look went to Issei, who nodded to her to continue. "Issei-san told me about what you are facing. He told me what you are in. If you leave, it'll be hard for me. And for Rainier, Middlet and Kalwarner. I don't want that. I don't want others to suffer. So that is why I am asking you." Rias smiled as she found those reasons to be good enough. And having the wielder of twilight healing on her peerage would be a huge help. "Very well, Asia-chan. Please kneel." The blonde did so as she was ordered while Rias summoned her evil pieces. Taking out her remaining bishop piece, she offered it to Asia. Still, with her entire life changing, Asia nodded. A page of her life had now been turned. And a new, near-eternal one, would be written down now. "In the name of the Mouse Surzex Lucifer, I, Rias Gremory, will take Asia Argento as my bishop." Asia had thankful tears running down her face as she felt power surging through her. This was how her life would unfold, weirdly enough, in purity. Issei had taken her along in this life, and they would travel down this road together. "Rise, my bishop, and be welcome." The arms encircled the former nun, and Issei was glad that Rias had taken up his offer. This was beneficial for all involved. No one had dared to interrupt this moment, while Asia snuggled into Rias' chest while the wind blew through the trees. Eventually, it was Issei who broke the silence. "Now, this is all touching, but I think we should get ready for our training. Don't you agree, Rias?" The king turned to the dragon, and she saw in his eyes that he was speaking the truth. "You are correct. You have to forgive me. I have prepared clothes for Asia-chan as well as you 3. They're in the house. Issei, I suppose you have some ideas on our training." Issei looked at her, and he cupped his chin. "Smart thinking. Precious little of that. I do have some ideas, yes." He went right after the girls. Asia was wearing a gym shirt and shorts like Kaneko. It hugged Rainier's chest, even in Yuma form. She had taken that up as it was easier to move around in. Middlet had gotten into a similar one as well while she glared daggers at Issei. Kalwarner wore an orange gym outfit as Rias had on. Issei had chosen his own clothes. He was wearing a black tank top and some baggy pants. It was clear that all women in the room liked that sight. Issei didn't mind it though. He was Y and he knew it. Outside, the devils waited, and when the rest of the group came outside, the devils were relieved to see him again. "Okay. Before we start training, Rias, I suppose that you want to ask something." Pecking him on the cheek, Issei turned to the same color as her hair. "You were training us before. You can continue on that." Issei smiled back at her, and it was rare that a woman could bring him to blush. "Okay. All of you sit down. We'll have to go over some notes. First things first." They all obeyed him. "Rias, this raiding game, I can do some help and I won't mind that. But we can't have me charging in and take out Riser. While I am very much capable of that, this has to be your victory. You will have to treat this as one of your chess matches. So all of you will have to train." The king had expected that reply, so it pleased Issei that she followed the idea that he told her. Do not worry. I had prepared for that. And so did my peerage. A king that lets a peerage run over him or her isn't worthy of being called a king. But as for training, you have good ideas. So I want to hear them. Issei nodded to her in thanks. We'll start on this. With me, we have 6 members. Asia is also out. She is a pacifist. You can't get her to hurt anyone else. She is also proficient in healing. Asia, you'll have your work cut out for you. The blonde nodded. As for you 4, we have 3 focuses. Speed, which is your call, Kiba. The knight nodded. Strength, it's where you shine in, Tuju. The rook just shrugged. And magical attacks. Rias and Himejima, that is your forte. I am not proficient in everything, but I do know enough of it to train all of you. We have 8 days. If we divide those, I can spend 2 days with all of you. But that doesn't mean that you can sit still. This where you 3 come in. Turning to his fallen angels, they perked up from hearing that. Issei had told them they would train with him, but they had no idea how that would play out. All of you, whether you like it or not, will have to work with the other. I have a slight idea of how you work. I do not expect to like your partners, but I do expect some respect. His eyes switched to the devils, and that has to be mutual. Is that acceptable for all of you? The silence told Issei enough. It wouldn't be easy to work with someone that you were born to hate, but things could change. Great. Middlet, you're Tuju's partner. Kalawarner, I want you to work with Kiba. Rainer, you're with Rias and Akino. He didn't miss the slight look that the queen gave his first fallen, but he would address it later. You can learn from the other. And you 3 have to become stronger. Those are my orders. Is that understood? The fallen angels understood that, and Issei hoped that civility could lead to camaraderie. I'm going to start with you, Tuju. Do you think we'll need a place a good bit further away? The smallest girl stood up and she nodded. Grabbing her up by her upper arms, Issei opened his wings. As for the rest of you, you got your assigned partners. Or continue on your own training. Your call. And with that, Issei took off. The peerage shared a look with the fallen angels who looked back. Kiba stood up and bowed to Kalawarner. Please treat me well, Kalawarner-san. Politeness had been hammered into him from a young age, and those couldn't be forgotten. Thank you, Kiba-kun. I do suggest we move a bit further away. Asia remained seated. She knew that Issei could take care of himself. So she would stay here. Rainer looked up at Rias, who had stood up, and offered her a hand. I suggest we leave the past. Remember his words and we'll do the same. Taking the hand of Rias, she got pulled up. I'll obey his orders, Rias. But don't expect me to go easy on you. Wouldn't have it any other way. Scene skip. So Riser took the bait? Indeed. Although the hacker Yuka was there, present, with the declaration of Issei Hayate's attempt of what he had said, the sigh came out audibly. Sirzex Lucifer had heard that Issei Hayate was no longer working for the Vatican, but to think that he would end up in Kuoh while watching over Rias, no one would have guessed that. She would have to dial Michael and tell him what happened. The angel would find some amusement in that part. And what do you think of Issei Hayate, Grafia? Sirzex asked her, Queen. Rude, and he stands strong. But confident without being why. Almost nearly suicidal. He knew I could blow him away, but that it would cost me dearly. But... The maid halted and began to think about her words. Permission to speak freely, Sirzex-sama? The Satan rolled her eyes as she watched the woman that she grew so fond of think about the words. Please, that is not something you should ever ask. He is maybe better suited for Rias. It is the man of her choosing. Of course, that is if they could win this fight. With Issei Hayate's help, the odds have changed. Sirzex hoped that Issei could help her little sister. It was better than Riser got his ass handed to him instead of being left at the altar. But she saw the changes in Grafia. Maybe she should take a look at this young man. Scene skip. That was the handy thing in the mountains. They could have large distances between their allies. Kaneko was sure that even if she shouted, no one would hear her. This is far enough. Issei skated downwards and the crater was big enough to fill a small pond. The guy really liked to show off. We thank you for flying with Issei Airway. Hope to see you again real soon. She had a small laugh when she heard that line. Chief, any reason why we flew away so far? Everyone was nicer to her, as she was so small. But Issei knew well enough. This first year saw a lot in her young life. Issei wanted privacy, so that was why he had to build some distance. Kneeling down, their eyes were on the same level. His eyes were sympathetic and understanding. Tuju, I'm going to be candid with you. I hope you treat me with the same respect. The girl nodded to him while Issei began to talk. I can see you have something in you. There's more to you. Now, it ain't my place to pry that open. It will not do me or Rias any good if you clam up before the fight. We are going to focus on what you do want to use. We have already started on the base. Your great strength. But unlike in the school, do not hold back during our match. I'm a big guy, I can take it. I'll run you through hard and I'll train you to a degree that you haven't seen before. Is that agreeable? Kaneko heard the sincerity, the honesty, the calm nature of how Issei spoke. She hadn't felt like this with anyone, except for when Rias took her in. Maybe, just on the very maybe, this guy could help her on getting what she had locked away. Issei would be the guy that would protect her from the others out there, the ones who would see her power as evil, as corrupt. He would help her through it. All right. Let's begin, Chief. Come at me whenever you are ready. Before he had even uttered those words, Kaneko had jumped up. She came crashing down on Issei. The dragon just blocked her kick, but she had buried his body into the ground. Instead of continuing the attack, she jumped away. Issei was already smiling inwardly that she had taken up his lessons. She wouldn't wait to see if her attack stuck. No, Kaneko would take another approach. It came from his rear, and this time, Issei had to blink before he got a kick that would destroy a normal person's head. In his case, he felt just a slight twinge of pain. I'll feel that in the morning. Issei wanted to grab her leg, but Kaneko had seen that one coming. She jumped away and Issei began to grin, again. Kaneko cracked her knuckles and Issei loosened his neck. He should take this a bit more seriously. Issei would never admit it out loud, but a part of him enjoyed this sort of lesson. While he didn't move from the crater in the middle, he had to go around as he was blocking her moves. If he had something to say about her, it was the fact that her strength wasn't the only thing she was using. The small lessons that he had planted in her during their casual spars had bloomed into big advice she took in. Her speed was used as well. Even when Issei wanted to retaliate, by grabbing her and throwing her away, she had learned to avoid the grabs. Issei had even contemplated fighting actively, but with the speed and relentless attacks, Issei found that he would let Kaneko practice on him before he would analyze how to proceed. Frankly, in his mind, if she kept this up, she would a sizable dent in the peerage of Riser. Only after 3 hours of training, Kaneko felt her body being wrecked. Trying to punch Issei was like punching a concrete wall. Issei felt a few punches actually hurting him, but there was more pride in his body than anything else. Kaneko had her arms dropped to the side while her legs trembled. Her muscles ached and her lungs were on fire. It hurt to even breathe. But Kaneko just felt something else. Issei walked up from the crater to the breathing junior. With a gentle finger flick, Kaneko Tuja fell down to the ground. But before her body could even hit the floor, Issei had captured her and gently scooped her up. You've done well. Stamina training? Kaneko just tried to nod but felt that she couldn't even do that. The dragon scooped her up and sat down like he was handling a cat. Opening his wings, he touched her body while he focused on his own energy. Divine dividing wouldn't help here, but Issei had learned tons of tricks. One of them was energy gifting. Slowly, Kaneko felt how her body was somewhat healing. Her stamina came back, her strength returned, and she felt like a light again. I'm impressed and proud you are using my training. Do you want to hear my thoughts? Kaneko felt like she wanted to get away, but she felt that at this moment, the only thing she longed for was to snuggle in his warmth. His strength. It was comforting. Just a second, Chief. I'm healing up. Issei remained quiet while he allowed Kaneko to heal herself on him. It felt nice and he liked what she was doing. There was something that he swore he heard purring. They remained in comfortable silence until she felt better. I did follow your tips. During my days off, I went for stamina training. Did I do good on that? Spending time on physical exercise is never lost. Yes, explain your ting. What I am also happy with is that you decided to change from different angles. You didn't stay in one spot at the same time. That is good. Kaneko tapped on his arms and he let her go. When Issei was seated, their eyes just met on the same level. She stood before him while he continued his thoughts. But the rook cut him off. Chief, why didn't you fight back? If you wanted to, you could have landed me knocked out. Issei smiled at her while he felt that it was right. His large hand landed on her head, and he ruffled her head. His smile was the same gentle one she had usually seen. Normally, she would bite him off, but the guy who could do the carnage wasn't someone Kaneko wanted to piss off. And the action, while patronizing for some, felt actually rather pleasant for Kaneko. Kaneko-chan, I could have done so. But what are we doing here? Training you and the other peerage members. You learn jack of crap if I do what you asked? Besides, you heard what I told Rias. Your king needs to earn this victory. And you and the other members want to be the ones who carry her there. Kaneko didn't know why he would use her first name, but she had given him the nickname so she would let him use it. Now you're healed up. Let's see how you play on defense. The eyes of Kaneko bulged out of her skull when Issei got up and he shook his arms. Don't worry, I'm not going to wreck you. But you'll still need to be carried home. Scene skip. Kaneko bravely stood her ground and Issei did keep his word. He held back to a degree that she could handle. Her body was already tired from the fight that it was in. Still, Issei carried her back to the mansion. A good meal, bath, and good night of rest did miracles on a body. In his mind, she was doing really well. Instead of tanking the hits, she had learned to avoid them. She had often jumped back and then got right at him. Issei felt she was doing a great job. When they got back to the house, he was pleasantly surprised that all were much like Kaneko. Asia was face down in the grass and it appeared she was asleep. Meanwhile, Kiba and Kalwarner were catching their breaths. Issei noticed they were a bit closer. Rias was covered in dirt, while Akino was in a shoulder carry by Rainer. Okay, it appears that you all have been good in practice. Now, it's time to relax. We can have a chat later, but first, I'll get you something to eat. Issei walked into the house while Rias found that she could let him take charge of cooking. She found that Kaneko looked very happy. How did it go, Kaneko? Chief gave me a real hard time. But he's proud of the progress. I think. I like it. I like him. He'll be the same for you, Rias Bucho. The crimson-haired princess took the words in pride. Inside the house, Issei began to cut vegetables and was glad that meat was in abundance. The stew wasn't hard to make, but they could all use it. Eventually, the rest of the group began to make their way inside the place while Issei was cooking. Like a guy who knew what he was doing, he was focused on the food. The peerage and the rest let him be as the minced meat was sizzling in the pans. The rest of them just set the table while he cooked. Now we are settled in the house. How did it go? Kalwarner? The blue-haired bombshell nodded to Kiba while she recounted the story. Yuto-kun certainly knows his way around the sword. Fast and agile, although there can be things done about his ruthlessness. Issei nodded while the spices were added to the stew. We have started on that. One more day before yours. Now, Asia. What is the reason for you being barely awake? The bishop was dozing off again, and it was Rias who answered the question. We have been running Asia-chan in the ground. With two groups fighting, she had her work cut out for her. I do believe that we can start her training on her magical training. Issei didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Perfect. That works fine by me. Asia knows some magic, and it can help with some training. Would any of you ladies mind teaching her some self-defense training? Asia just groaned at the table, and Issei felt that adorable while she sulked. Rainer? Her name came as a question. The fallen shared a look with Rias, who tended to the semi-conscious queen, who just shrugged. Rias and Akino are doing well. I had an idea you wanted me to focus on CQB. So that is what I did. They can certainly use some practice on that. Issei grinned while he turned his back. This is good. This is very good. Now, Rias, how did your training with Rainer go? Did she give any trouble that I should be aware of? Rias looked to the fallen angel, and when she felt a friendly hand going up her shoulder, it didn't fill her body with revulsion as she would have done 2 months ago. They had more alike than they thought. Nothing really. Some awkwardness, but that is understandable. I think we can come to even enjoy this. Great. How about you, Middlet? The gothic girl just sent Issei a dirty glare. Been doing my own thing. Issei took that as something good. For all of your training. I'd like you to work with my fallen angels as well through training. Growth can only come if you go beyond your usual boundaries. The two looked at him while Middlet just glared. You all forget where I come from. I have seen many of your old brothers and sister grow as they broke themselves and trained. The same is for all of you. But that is something you can focus on later. Now, the stew has to be on the fire for a bit. Kaneko-chan, you told them about our training. Kaneko looked at the man who had been training him. Done so, Chief. When this is over, you can ask me any time. We are going to cram and go hard. But you'll all be better for it when it comes to blows with Riser. Rias smiled as she began to think of a certain plan that she could have to thank the man. After dinner, we were thinking of having a bath. Maybe you can join us at our side. I don't mind. Any objections? The king asked the group of women at large. Akino giggled as she usually did. Of course not. I can wash his back. Asia didn't move from her spot but gave a thumbs up. Rainer and Kalwarner turned to each other. We are his slaves. We don't have a say in the matter. Kaneko shot a sympathetic look at him. Sorry, Chief. But I am not comfortable with that yet. Issei shrugged as he began to stir the stew. No worries. We move at our own pace. Sides, a bot is to relax. Beautiful girls in a bath caused the opposite to happen, and that took the entire group by surprise as they blushed. Issei smirked inwardly as he watched them. He still got it. Scene skip. Asia had rarely found herself being jealous of others. It was frowned upon by the church to covet others, and yet, when she looked at the 4 more mature women in the bath, she felt outmatched. Her own modest S weren't growing that well yet, and Aquino, Rias, Rainier, and Kerlongsj already had S that most adult women would kill for. Rainier had perky upstanding S while the ones of Kerlongsj could rival Aquino's glorious chest. It is a great place. If we had known this before, Rainier said as she soaked in next to Aquino. We are honored with your praise. No hard feelings, Rainier? The fallen shook her head while Kerlongsj wasn't sure why Rias had asked her to wash her hair. Is this good? Perfect. There were worse tasks to perform, and Kerlongsj really enjoyed the action of the hair. Asia just sighed half-heartedly when she watched them. Don't be greedy, Kaneko said as she washed her own body. Middlet had already left the bath. She was exhausted from the fight, and if Asia was honest, so was she. On the bot of the males, Yudo Kiba was used to sharing baths, and he found that Issei was the type of guy who could appreciate a good bath. Issei had soaked in the hot water while he enjoyed the sounds of the women. Not going to peek? Issei was glad that the knight had a sense of humor. The dragon shook his head while he sat back with a grin. No reason for that. Besides, I'm not that kind of idiot, Issei said while he continued to listen. You don't strike me as the guy who would say no to a woman, and I don't. Bus, listen here, Kiba. There is a difference between going along and letting your hormones go wild. I don't want that kind of thing. It is no hair better than what Riser has in mind. The pretty boy found that a surprising note as a comparison. Oh, can you explain that to me, Issei-kun? Issei smirked when he heard that name. All in due time. When it is your time of training. I'm going to dry off and crawl into my bed. I need some sleep. Issei made good on that. Rias had put his fallen in another room, and frankly, he didn't blame her. It wouldn't be proper to let them sleep in the same bed. So Issei didn't mind that this night he had to sleep without a pretty girl. It was nice once in a while to have room. Before Albion could even come to talk to him, Issei was fast asleep. It really felt nice, and whoever the Gremory contacted to make their beds, they did an awesome job. Scene skip. When Issei woke up, it was still dark outside, although the sun had slowly begun to rise. He guessed that his body had forced him to wake up early. Yet he remained in bed for a bit. He listened to the sounds of a sleeping house. No reason to get them up early and be an asshole to the ones around the house. You made the right call to train them. Of course, his partner came out to haunt him. Gee, you think? If I carry Rias to her victory, there would be nothing out there, and you don't want to claim her. She likes you, you like her, there is more to her. I want to make her fall for me even more. And I'll get there. And for now, we'll just enjoy those peaceful days. And that was enough to shut up his partner. Issei began to think about what he would do with Kaneko. He could see to that when he got to fight with her, he wouldn't go all out on her. Everyone was nicer to Kaneko. Scene skip. Sorry about blocking you last night, Chief. He would take that tone more seriously if she actually said those words with any intent. They were walking back this time instead of flying. No worries about that, Kaneko-chan. Issei was with a smile on his face while Kaneko had a surprised look on her face. If she was to guess, most teenage boys would act like idiots who were thinking with their S. You are not mad? The look on his face was a bit more serious. He stopped and kneeled to her height. You don't want to do it cause you're not comfortable. I am not a guy who would disrespect you. Rias, you, Aquino, Asia. You're all ladies and deserve to be courted. One of my personal rules. The rook smirked a bit when she heard him talk. You're saying that you would pull out all stops for us. I said that I'd date Rias if I win her from Riser, right? The reason why I want you to be on your top level is because of another reason. Kaneko's puzzled look was adorable, and Issei decided to tell her, I can win this fight, yeah, but I'd be just like Riser. Winning over Rias just because of the winner and spoils and yada yada da. I don't want that. I want to earn Rias' respect. And a way to get there is by getting you in gear. Kaneko shared his smirk but found something else. You'd be going after those fallen angels and possibly other girls. Raising his hand, she saw the sacred gear appear in his arm. I said that I would be courting. I never said that I'd be monogamous. But I would do it fair and square. A woman has to accept that part if she wishes to continue something with me. Issei stood back up and he scooped up the small rook. I do things my way. And if they agree, fine. If not, their call. And I doubt that my ways are worse than Riser's. Sleazebag that he is. Holding out her fist, Issei got what Kaneko meant. I like you? Issei. The soft words were hardly heard, but Issei found that Kaneko meant them. Thanks. How about we continue our training? This time though, Issei fought back. He was more serious about his assault, and while he still did not use his sacred gear, Kaneko found that he certainly knew his way around a fight. Still, the lessons that he taught her were certainly coming to mind. Avoiding attacks became more important instead of tanking hits. Fighting multiple opponents would be tricky, but Kaneko doubted that most of Riser would be as hard-hitting and fast as Issei. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him with the secrets that were deeply hidden in her body, but those could wait. What Issei focused on during those 2 days were the powers she counted on. At the end of the day, Issei and Kaneko walked back to the mansion. She walked right next to him, and Issei felt a surge of pride in her. More than he actually should. When they got back, Issei wasn't disappointed to find everyone else there waiting for them. And, Rias, proud as ever, asked, and Kaneko walked over to her. Don't let him get away, Rias Bucho. I wouldn't forgive you. Rias wanted to cuddle and hug the rook, but she just ruffled her hair as she usually did. That is excellent. Issei, your rook got some serious power training under her belt. I doubt that Riser's peerage would give her much trouble. I'm proud of her. And if you all keep this up, it might show off. His eyes settled on Kiba, who looked embarrassed by the dragon. I hope you sleep well tonight. You'll need your rest. Issei knew that whatever Kiba had, they had their matches. Now the gloves would come off. Scene skip. Issei had a good day when he was training. Kiba, much less so. The knight laid defeated in the rubble while swords laid around him. What have we learned? Issei walked over to the handsome. That you really meant it when you fought back. Kiba bit Issei while Issei jammed Joyous right into the ground. He had done it before, but now, Kiba had learned more of Issei. Kiba, you have worked on your stamina. Me, happy guy about that. Me also a happy guy on thinking about sending the swords through the ground. Me not happy guy because you ignore the most important part. Fighting like a bastard, Kiba said as Issei nodded above him. You don't have to go all out. But believe me when I tell you that you need to think about it. Don't hold back on anything. Kiba still couldn't get up as he felt too broken for that. Besides that, anything else? I am not really good on swords, so you are on your own there. What I do like is that you worked on your stamina. When you can move again, let's see how you deal with overwhelming force. Kiba had no idea what Issei meant by that, but he soon realized what the dragon aimed for. While it was one-on-one, Issei showed off with power. The knight found that he wielded Joyous like a professional. Issei used a lot more power, but like Kaneko, he didn't pull out his sacred gear. Kiba jammed his sword in the ground and grunted one important word, sword birth. Issei had to fall back further, and found that a long sword flew right in his direction. If he had hesitated one more moment, the sword would have skewered him. His eyes scanned the environment, but found that Kiba had disappeared. A light prick on his neck hinted where the knight had gone. Surrender. Before Issei could even say anything, Issei felt a warm and light liquid running down his neck. Blood. His blood. I'm not asking again. Issei dropped Joyous and held his hands up. Good. Rating game? I wouldn't hesitate to cut your head off. Issei could just rip the sword out of the hands of Kiba, but that wouldn't do any good. The knight had won. Excellent work. Use the same ruthless nature, and you are going to be a menace for Riser. The entire day, the two men fought without holding back on anything. Only there, they knew what it meant to fight. Issei felt that despite his nature, Kiba had a certain pride in him. Whenever he could, he glanced at Joyous. Issei rarely saw such hatred in the eyes of anyone. The dragon had summoned the same look when the Pope and Michael told him what they had done to his parents. At the end of the day, Issei walked back, with Kiba slumped all over him. When the dragon saw the women, he was somewhat glad to see how Rainier and Calawarner had been training with Rias and Aquino. With her pupil gone, the blue-haired bombshell had now decided to help Rainier. Middlet and Kaneko had their own matches and both looked roughed up. Asia sat up now. An improvement over being a corpse from 2 days ago. We're back! Issei shouted, and that was enough for all to stop the fights. I see great improvement. Keep that up. It was all that needed to be said. Issei felt that it showed enough. He didn't worry about Kaneko. So far, he couldn't help her with the training. Asia was a healer, so he doubted she would be of any use in a fight. Maybe some self-defense training. It could wait. The knight would do well. The day after tomorrow, he would focus on the king and queen. Issei would help them to achieve victory. Scene skip. From that point onward, Issei had matches with Kiba for one more day. He would never be a full bastard like Issei, but at the least, the knight would have more tricks up his sleeve when they had their raiding game. Just like with Kaneko, there was a dark secret that Yudo Kiba carried. Issei wouldn't pry and see what it was. The sharp nose told him some elements that shouldn't be in a devil, but those could wait. Besides fighting mean, Kiba also improved his stamina. Those would be the most important factors. The knight would never be able to tank hits as Kaneko would, so that was why Issei focused on those other parts. There was less to talk about with Kiba compared to Kaneko. Neither of the males felt the need for that. It was just training and using different ways to get your foe down. Issei found no reason to doubt his progress. So he took that as good enough. Scene skip. The sounds that came from the bath made it all too clear what was going on. Issei and Kiba sat back in the water while the sounds came from the girls. It sounds like they're having fun, Issei commented as his imagination was doing most of the thinking. Kiba smirked as he soaked in. I didn't take you for a guy who wouldn't try to take a look. No reason to try. The walls protect anything. Kaneko-chan doesn't want me there, so we are not going for it. The knight found that Issei knew more than he let on. Still, you came from the Vatican. White Saint. Issei cringed as he heard that nickname echo through the room. I hate that nickname. I have seen my fair share of ladies there. You don't want to know what goes on there. Issei didn't know it either, and he was more than happy to keep it that way. And what about you? The knight blinked as Issei addressed him. You are certainly popular with the ladies back in Kuoh. Do you have any luck scoring dates? Going out? Banging? Getting laid? Blushing, Kiba looked away. It is not proper for gentlemen to talk about that. The dragon barked a laugh when he heard that. You take me a gentleman? I'll take that as a compliment. Scene skip. Issei was called into the room that Kalwarner and Rainier shared. What is so important to get me in your rooms? You want to show me something? Issei jokingly asked as the two giggled. Flashing him might distract him, but it wasn't enough to keep the grin off his face. Those are nice. But that is not the only thing you wanted to show me. Rainier was the one who spoke. I will admit, training with Rias and the rest isn't that much fun. But it showed off. Both of them showed their wings, and Issei found that 2 pairs of wings were attached to their back. It did impress the dragon. We have to thank you for it. If you didn't save us that night, we would have never gotten those wings. Kalwarner smiled at Issei while she felt the power rushing through her veins. You have done this. On your own. But that doesn't stop me from being proud of you. Both of you. They tackled him to the ground, and before he left, Issei got kissed by the two. It felt nice like this. There was more to those than just easy lays. Scene skip. Issei found the sight of both Rias and Aquino, dressed up in their gym outfits, alluring and interesting. Rainier and Kalwarner had been fighting with them, and this time, the 2 great ladies of Kuoh had been affiliated with what Issei called speed and strength training. I saved you 2 for last. The reason you 2 might guess. Issei had his arms crossed while he looked at them. So what are we going to focus on? What did Rainier and Kalwarner use against you? Issei shot back the question while the 2 ladies shared a look. Most part, they came close and we had to blast through. We have suffered quite some wounds during that, Aquino admitted while Issei nodded. That is how this works. Both of you don't have much hand-to-hand combat, but that is also changing. I have also spoken to them. Harsh training for both of you has also shown its marks to me. The dragon cracked his knuckles as he stood before them. We are going to continue on the training that we had already. Issei knew what that meant, and for Albion, it meant it was time to play. My host has been calm with the rook and knight. Show us what you're made of. Issei opened his wings and zoned in at them. Rias was the first to act as she unleashed her power of destruction. Issei divided that power while Aquino was next. Instead of what Issei would have guessed, she didn't use her magic but came in close. A high kick came from the side as Issei felt the power of a rook. She took him by surprise, and even he couldn't deal with that. Before he could focus again, he felt slender arms wrap around his neck. They tightened, and Issei turned his head to find red hair around him. Rias had sneaked up at him, and she began to use her own body against him. So how would you get out of this? No guy would want that. A beautiful girl pressed up against the back? No sane guy would get out of that. He could hear her heart quicken, so he threw her wide body over his head and aimed her right at Aquino. They recovered quickly and dispersed. Issei had just the time to avoid a raging fire and ice-cold water. Aquino had been practicing. A blast came from the side, and it told him that Rias had also aimed at him. The power burned through him while he protected himself. How is that for close contact? Rias asked, and Issei felt the power eat at him before his sacred gear shouted, Divide! 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 The power of the vanishing dragon went away while Issei thanked every deity he knew that he was made of stern stuff. I prefer the other one. His ears told him that something sizzled in this time. He could avoid the lightning coming his way. Aquino had taken up another position. It had been all too clear how they worked. Issei found that this worked out. I have to say, partner, those ladies show promise in becoming your mates. Do you mind keeping your thoughts to yourself? When this is over, Issei felt another surge hitting him, and it had been clear that his days of teaching and holding back had done some damage to him. He turned back when he got magical bombardment coming his way. His wings were all that he needed to protect himself. That's enough, he shouted to them, and they obeyed him. You two certainly worked out on this. The two landed, and their smiles were something he could grow used to. You're a big target. Easier to hit than the fallen. Aquino giggled. And with you, we don't need to hold back. So what are your thoughts? Rias added while Issei stood up. I see that you two certainly have improved on your teamwork and magic. Keep in mind though that in the raiding game, that won't happen. I don't see how to improve on you there. Now, it's time for something else. Body training became most of their training. Complicated holds, fist fights, and wrestling, which all parties grew to like. Issei found that Aquino was faster than Rias, and she had greater flexibility. She was as slippery as an eel and could get out. Rias had better techniques, and Issei wanted to know who taught her fist fights. They did switch with partners during their matches. Aquino was taking a break while Rias and Issei were tugged. He had gotten underneath her belly. Ignoring that one of the best pairs of the universe would ever know was pressed in his face, Issei rolled his body over and she went along. Unlike what he had guessed, that Rias would give up, she tensed up and slid above him. Her long and strong legs wrapped themselves around his neck. His arm was put into a lock as Rias began to press on it. She was making clear how this match was going. Issei began to struggle back, but it became clear how the king wasn't letting him go. Issei wanted to use a bit more force, but Rias just kept restricting him. In a real fight, he wouldn't have entertained her, but this could be a bit more relaxed. So he let himself go limp and tapped out. Excellent, Rias. The crimson-haired princess let him go and stood up. Looking at him, the dragon sat down with a humble smile on her face. I have no doubt that you would have ruined me in a real fight. In a real fight, I wouldn't have thought of close-quarters fight with a magician like you. Use your magic on me. This is a just-in-case sort of thing. Aquino giggled as the queen stood up. This is all touching, but it's my turn now, Rias. So if you could let me. The king obeyed, and Issei was ready to go. Sparring with the two most popular girls in school, many guys would love to be in his shoes. And he loved being in his. So when Aquino ran up to him, Issei wrapped his arms around her waist and slammed her to the ground. There was no reason to play gently. Riser's peerage wouldn't be going easy on them either. Scene skip. The days had gone fast by that point, and Issei couldn't be happier with the progress that each one of the group had gone through. For some reason, his fallen angels had now all 4 wings, while the peerage of Rias had also seen great improvement. Asia, cute little thing, had already worked her way up to them, and she could handle healing. There was more that she could do with her sacred gear, but Issei found that what she could do at that point had to suffice. Kaneko was nearly the same speed as Kiba, and Issei felt that she had gotten closer to him during their training. When things worked out, he would be there to help her out. She would give Riser's peerage a serious amount of trouble. Kiba had learned to throw his swords, and while Issei doubted that he could ever beat the chivalry out of him, Kiba should pray that he would be the one who did that. But Issei began to grow fond of that night. Whenever they would train, he could keep his emotions in check. So Issei could see how this would work out. Aquino and Rias had seen the biggest changes in their training. Aquino had learned to use all attributes of the queen piece, not just the bishop. She hit as hard as Kaneko and was getting to the speed of Kiba. Although she preferred to use other techniques than her fists, Rias' own power would come through later. But Issei found that he could wait on that later. In the end, it came down to him in this match. He was Rias' solution, her key to survival and freedom, and Issei found no issue with playing that part of her savior, as long as she would keep in mind what it meant for him. The house has a small pavilion where Rias had taken up residency. He found it most peculiar that she was reading a book at this hour, or most likely, she was reading that book before she fell asleep. So he walked over to her and sat down next to her. Softly shaking her at the shoulder was enough to bring Rias back awake. I'm up. She clearly had been awake for too long. Not sure if that is so good right now. Without even asking, he lifted Rias up while he sat down. His own body heat warmed her chilly body up. The nightgown she wore and the panties she had on barely would suffice against the cold. The effects of a warm rock pressed against her body had the noticeable effect that Issei was so much hoping for. You need sleep. So do we all. The rating game is tomorrow, and if you're not up to snuff, we are going to suffer for it tomorrow. All our hard work would be ruined. The tone had just the right amount of understanding and admonishing. I know, but I can't help it. There is a lot at stake for me. It's a whole different thing than a stray hunt. She turned to face the man that she grew fond of. It's because of who he is. Riser Phoenix shares the same attribute as the phoenix. An immortal bird that can regenerate any wounds that he receives. Plus, his track record is 8 wins and 2 losses. 2 of which he gave away. Tapping her on the nose, she found Issei's friendly smile in front of her. It relaxed her a bit while Issei's eyes studied her. Rias, if there's one thing I have learned, it's this. Nothing is invincible. If something seems, looks, or behaves invincible, it just means that someone hasn't figured out a way to defeat it yet. Plus, Riser is also a devil, right? Yes, I got a holy sword etched up my arm. That will do him in. Although part of him wants to beat the shit out of him, pardon my language, just to see how far I can push it. Kissing him, Rias began to like that even more. Thank you, Issei. But my parents could see this as ending in a loss for me. I will be there to prevent that. Though, there is more why you hate the idea of getting married to him besides the fact that he turned his peerage into his personal whorehouse. Rias nodded to him. I'm the daughter of the Gremory house. I'm its heiress after my older sister became Satan. No one sees the Rias that I am as a girl. In the world of devils, I'm always Rias Gremory. I'm proud of my name, but I am never treated like a girl. I want to find someone who sees me for me. Issei tried to get the smile off his face but found that impossible. And at school, you found me by some sort of miracle and got a dragon courting you who sees you for you. 'Cause I don't see you as an heiress. What I have in my lap is a girl that I am growing fond of, and maybe I can love in a way that she wants. Rias kissed him again while she felt warmed by him. I think you described the way how I see you, Issei. Although I do have to ask. Wouldn't it be easier to soil me? Issei shook his head while his face turned as serious as during their training. That would open a lot of cans of worms that we wouldn't close. Value yourself a bit more than just giving yourself to me like that. Second thing is that Riser and your family would come after me. So I'd much rather win you in the traditional sense where you and I can elope from there. When we win this, and you wanna have that fun, sure. Does that mean that you don't find me why when I'm dressed like this and I am wearing this? Rias had her teasing spirit back, but she had to learn how Issei could be handled. The dragon grabbed one elegant arm and forced the right hand right into his trousers. The eyes of Rias bulged out of her skull as she felt Issei. I think that is a stupid question given how you look. And I'll let him calm down when I put you to bed. He let her hand go, and the blush on her cheeks made her so adorable. If you tease me, I'll do it back. Kissing her on the nose, Rias snapped out of her stupor. You are so mean. The way Rias spoke the words was enough for Issei to realize that she didn't mean those words. Thanks. But Rias, let us leave this discussion for another time. I'll put you to bed and get some sleep myself. Scooping her up, Rias found that she could get used to the bridal carry of Issei. Neither said a word as she put her head on his shoulder. He gently opened the door where Akino lay sleeping. From the words she said, Issei guessed that the dream was pleasant. Tucking her in, Rias loved the feeling of being pampered. After one more kiss, she looked up at him. Issei, promise me something. Promise me we will win. Issei nodded to her. Oh, you can bet your life on it. We will win. Rias had already fallen asleep before Issei let out a demented chuckle. There would be quite some fun when they would go out and play. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Kerlongsj Evert Orlejov for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.